visit to the United Kingdom. Yes, Macron became the president of France in 2017. He's visited on less elaborate occasions, but this, the first official state visit of this president of France to the United Kingdom.
Yes, and apparently he is the first EU leader as well to visit in a state visit to Britain since Brexit.
Which is a significant moment, of course. This government is trying to present a united front with many European countries, saying that our relationship with France has never been closer. Because there's politics behind the pageantry. What we're seeing here is, of course, the elaborate decorations and royal flourish that only Britain can put on to such a visit. But, of course, there are practical things that the government wants to see out of this visit. In particular, a deal on migration. Could this be the presidential and royal connection that facilitates a negotiated political deal on a one-in, one-out policy for small boat migrants?
Well, I'm sure a lot of people listening and watching to this afternoon will hope so. Just looking at some of the statistics on how much we have handed over to the French in terms of money to try and sort out this issue of illegal migration. 700-odd million pounds, Tom. Nearly £1 billion. One could say has been spent on all of this. So yes, the pomp and pageantry is beginning. But yes, we're going to head to Cameron Walker, our royal correspondent, who is in Windsor for us. Cameron, thank you very much indeed. So what have we got in store this afternoon? What are we looking at as well?
Good afternoon, Tom and Emily. Yes, you're watching live pictures, for those of you watching on television, of the King and Queen on a specially built dais on Datchet Road in the centre of the town of Windsor in Berkshire. It's the other side of the castle to where I am, just slightly further down the hill. And we haven't seen scenes like this in Windsor since 2014, which was the last state visit taking place at Windsor Castle rather than Buckingham Palace. The reason being, it's because Buckingham Palace is still being resurfaced and it started to affect the staterooms. So for the next few years at least, we are expecting every single state visit to take place at Windsor Castle. And as you were saying in your introduction, Tom, this is the first time that President Macron is being received by His Majesty for an inward state visit to the United Kingdom. The last French president to receive this honour was back in 2008, where Nicolas Sarkozy was received by the late Queen Elizabeth II. Now, the King has been received by the Lord Lieutenant, who you can just see on your screen here, of the Royal County of Berkshire, Mr. Andrew Try. And you may be able to see as well on your screens the Silver Stick in waiting, Brigadier Rupert Everts as well, and Lieutenant Colonel James Colby too. Now the Queen, I can tell you, as I've been given outfit details for her, for those of you interested in royal fashion, she's wearing an emerald green chiffon dress by Anna Valentine and a hat by Philip Tracy, both of which have now received royal warrants actually. She's also wearing a diamond brooch that belongs to the late Queen, so perhaps quite poignant to the piece of Queen Elizabeth II is part of this state visit. And what we are waiting for now in the next few minutes is that car procession of Presidents Macron and Mrs. Macron alongside the Prince and Princess of Wales, who about half an hour ago or so greeted the President and First Lady of France at RAF Northolt. They will arrive to Datchet Road, where the King and Queen, you can see on your screens live, are standing on this specially built dais for the official ceremonial welcome for the President at the start of this three-day state visit. Today is all about the pomp and pageantry, the so-called royal soft power, essentially buttering up a foreign head of state ahead of tough political talks which are due to take place in Downing Street on Thursday. A number of dignitaries here to greet the President and the First Lady. But unlike if this state visit was happening in London at Horse Guards Parade, there are no senior government ministers here on the dais. Usually if this was happening at Horse Guards, you would see the Prime Minister, the Foreign Secretary and the Home Secretary at least on the dais alongside the King and Queen, for the King to introduce his government ministers to the foreign head of state. That's not happening here in Windsor this afternoon, although the President and the First Lady will be greeting those senior government ministers in London after lunch. Now you can just see on your screens now the arrival of the President of France and the First Lady alongside the Prince and Princess of Wales. in some of the British royal cars, actually. So the French government has not brought along a presidential motorcade, as perhaps you would get with President Trump in September. That he's borrowing King Charles's cars by the looks of it. And the French president there just exiting the car to be greeted by His Majesty the King at the start of this historic 3-day state visit to the United Kingdom. Warm words there. We're just seeing kisses on the cheek from the Queen and First Lady Bridget Macron, the Prince and Princess of Wales, just behind the President and the First Lady as well. The King and Queen, of course, undertook a state visit to France back in 2023. The last time, we believe, the Prince and Princess, well, the Princess of Wales at least, met President Macron was back in 2022 during that reception of foreign dignitaries on the eve of Queen Elizabeth II's funeral in September 2022. But of course, this is a much more happy occasion designed to strengthen ties between Britain and France. We know that Sir Keir Starmer and his government wants to have a bit of a reset, perhaps, with EU countries following Brexit, and this is part of that soft power. And of course, one of the weapons, as I suppose, in his arsenal is the royal family's soft power. They're just greeting a number of dignitaries, including Mr. Andrew Try, His Majesty's Lord Lieutenant of the Royal County of Berkshire, Councillor Mandy Kubra, the Mayor of the Royal Borough of Windsor and Maidenhead. We also have there Mr. Sean Taylor, the High Sheriff of the Royal County of Berkshire, Mr. Jack Rankin, Conservative Member of Parliament for Windsor, Mr. Jason Hogg, the Chief Constable of Thames Valley Police, the local police force here in Windsor. We also have Major General James Boder, who is the Major General commanding Household Division, and Mr. Stephen Evans, the Chief Executive of the Royal Borough of Windsor and Maidenhead. So something totally different, really, from what perhaps you would see if the state visit taking place in London. As I was saying, usually this would be at Horse Guards Parade, and it would be the Home Secretary, Prime Minister and Foreign Secretary, as well as other government ministers, perhaps the Mayor of London, for example, but taking place in a totally separate city to London. And then in the next few moments, we're expecting presentations to be made. The President and the First Lady of France will move to the front of the dais, and the captain's escort will give a royal salute to the honoured guests. And then the French national anthem will be played in honour of the President of France. That, of course, taking place in just a few moments. We just see the Prince and Princess of Wales, the King and Queen, and the French President and Mrs. Macron mingling, exchanging a few exchanging some small talk there. Of course, we need to remember the King and members of the royal family are non-political, so I suspect it's not going to be about the Channel migrant crossings and defence and all the rest of it. I think that will be left up to the Prime Minister and government ministers. Of course, all of these, all the people you see here, well, actually, we don't know about the Princess of Wales, but at least the Prince of Wales, President Macron, Mr. Macron, King and Queen will be attending a state banquet later on this evening in Windsor Castle. But you can see there a member of the military bands. We've also got the household cavalry, and you may have just heard on my microphone there a royal salute being fired in the park here in Windsor. Separate gun salutes have also been fired at the Tower of London. It's the King's Troop Royal Horse Artillery who are currently firing a gun salute here in the, I believe it's Windsor Great Park, and a different regiment firing a gun salute at the Tower of London, His Majesty's Tower and Fortress. And I'll pause for the French national anthem. French national anthem there on the royal dais in Windsor on Datchet Road. I can also tell you, for those of you, if you're wondering if there's been a close-up of His Majesty's face, and particularly his right eye, overnight I'm told that the King experienced a burst blood vessel in his right eye, which is said to be unrelated to any of his other health conditions. Of course, we are mindful that he is undergoing a weekly cycle of cancer treatments. It's not expected, this burst blood vessel, to affect any of the King's duties during this 3-day state visit, but just so you are aware, if you are seeing any, if you're wondering why His Majesty's right eye is a little bit red, that is the reason he experienced a burst blood vessel overnight. We are expecting the Lord Ashton of Hyde, the Master of the Horse, to conduct the President and the King as they enter their carriage, ready for the carriage ride through the streets of Windsor to the cheering crowds who have been queuing now for a number of hours. That carriage ride expected to take place very shortly. You can just see the carriage sweeping into view now. This is the 1902 State Landau carriage, which will contain the King and the President of France, Emmanuel Macron. An open carriage, so not closed off, so the crowds can see both His Majesty and the President of France. The carriage after is a semi-state Landau carriage, the Queen, which will contain the Queen and Mrs. Brigitte Macron, the First Lady of France as well. And the controller of that carriage will be the Lord Chamberlain's Lord Chamberlain's office will be conducting that particular carriage. And then in the third carriage, you can just see the King there and President Macron entering the 1902 State Landau carriage. The Prince and Princess of Wales and members of the French official suite are going to be in the carriage behind. So the Prince and Princess of Wales accompanied in the Ascot Landau carriage by the French Minister for the Armed Forces, Sébastien Lecornu, and the French Minister of Culture, Mrs. Rachida Dati, and then a number of French and British diplomats and dignitaries in the carriages behind. The carriage ride will take the royal party and the French presidential party up the hill from Datchet Road past Windsor Castle, where the cheering crowds are expected, of course, to cheer on the French guests and the King and Queen. They'll then make their way through Thames Street High Street, Park Street, Cambridge Gate onto the Windsor Long Walk, and then through the King George IV Gateway, and then finally into the quadrangle of Windsor Castle in the Upper Ward, where a guard of honour is waiting, and His Majesty the King will invite President Macron of France to inspect the guard of honour. Of course, this will signify the joint ties of Britain and French armed forces as two members of NATO. You can just see the Prince and Princess of Wales there on your screen, alongside the French Ministers of Defence and Culture in the Ascot Landau carriage, the third carriage in this procession. And any moment now we will get the start of this royal procession, something they have been rehearsing for all of yesterday. And I think it certainly entertained the tourists yesterday, and it's certainly entertaining the tourists today. I think a vast majority of the crowd here are indeed tourists who have just struck a pot of gold, maybe, with the pomp and pageantry on display here at Windsor. There we go, the first carriage off, 1902 State Landau carriage. And the French national anthem playing once again by a military band, the King and President waving to members of the public who have gathered, making their way up Datchet Road, Tom and Emily. And I believe that is the Prince and Princess of Wales you are seeing on your screen in the Ascot Landau carriage. Stationary at the moment as the Household Cavalry march past. I believe that's the Blues and Royals from what I can see on my little screen here. The full carriage procession now just riding past this dais on Datchet Road. For those of you listening on the radio, it's decked out in a red carpet, has the Union flag, the French flag, and the royal coat of arms in the centre, alongside flowers of red, white and blue, the colours of both the British and the French flag. Another shot of the Prince and Princess of Wales there, of those of you watching on television. The King and Queen just making their way up to my position here, just to the left of the King Henry VIII gate here at Windsor Castle, in the lower ward of Windsor Castle. They've struck lucky with the weather, the British weather very much on their side today at the start of the summer season, the summer holiday season for the school holidays. You can see members of the crowd waving to the royal and presidential parties, waving Union flags. I can't, from what I can see, if they are waving any French flags. The screen's slightly too small from where I'm stood.
But it does look, Cameron, like there is quite a turnout. Quite a turnout amongst the residents of Windsor. No doubt some tourists there as well, for what is a day of spectacle and a day of ceremony. Of course, there'll be a meeting later on between the President and the King. What are we expecting to happen in the immediate minutes ahead? Because there's going to be a bit of politics potentially later in the day.
Yeah, there certainly is politics later in the day, Tom. Immediately following the carriage procession, which is just coming past our position now, we're expecting the King and President Macron to inspect a guard of honour inside the quadrangle of Windsor Castle, which is in the upper ward. Following all of that pomp and pageantry and the ceremonial welcome, members of the royal family and the French party will go back inside Windsor Castle. You might be able to hear the cheering crowds now as the King and President Macron of France just travel up the high street. When they go back inside, you can just see live shots now of the upper ward here at Windsor Castle, the quadrangle, where we're expecting this military procession and this guard of honour to be inspected by the King and President Macron of France. Following that, there is going to be a private lunch that the Prince and Princess of Wales, the Queen, will attend as well, and then there will be a viewing of French artefacts within the royal collection. Of course, we have 1,000 years of shared history between the United Kingdom and France. There is certainly, Tom and Emily, a much bigger cheer for the Prince and Princess of Wales than there was for the King and President Macron of France. I'm absolutely certain of that. You may have been able to pick that up on the microphone. Sorry, it's all happening at once here, so I'll go back to your question, Tom. Yes, following that Royal Collection Trust, the President and the First Lady will make their way to London, where they're expected to spend some time in the Palace of Westminster. I believe it's Lancaster House, where they are meeting some of the opposition party heads, and of course he is expected to meet President Macron to meet the Prime Minister and other members of Parliament and members of the House of Lords. The President and First Lady also will be laying a wreath at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier at Westminster Abbey before returning back here to Windsor Castle for the magnificent state banquet. More than 160 guests are expected, and the table in St George's Hall, 50 metres long. It is quite the spectacle. I'm going to be lucky enough to go inside and view it myself a little bit later on.
And
Go on, Emily.
Cameron, just wondering, what's on the menu? Because at these state banquets, usually it's a sort of a nod to the French side, a nod to the British side. Will it be a full-on French menu? What do you expect?
Well, coincidentally, Emily, the menu is always written in French, but regardless of what foreign head of state is visiting the King for a state banquet, it's always written in French. It's been that way for hundreds of years. But in terms of the cuisine, it tends to be a mixture of the two. There tends to be it tends to be parts of British cuisine which are perhaps organic or grown in the Highgrove Gardens or grown in the Windsor Gardens, and excuse me, and of course we will find those details out a little bit later on today. As soon as we have those details, I'll bring that straight to you. But of course, it is going to be a magnificent feast, and of course, the wine pairings as well is going to be. There's a massive cellar in Windsor Castle, and I think I've told you before, Tom and Emily, it's one of the oldest working kitchens in the country, hundreds of years old, dates back to before the time of Henry VIII, but I'm sure the ovens have been a little bit updated.
We're just getting some spectacular pictures here of the King and the President of France on their horse-drawn carriage. We're seeing, of course, I think there's Prince. Oh no, there's the wives. There's Camilla and Bridget Macron, both there together in a carriage, and behind them, I expect, well, we're seeing lots and lots of cavalry there. I should say, that
interesting
joining us,
that they split the men and the women.
I imagine that's got to be a traditional way of doing things, but a very interesting.
Unless it was a request from the wives.
Let's not get into the conspiracy theories yet. But especially after that, perhaps slight choice appearance of the Macrons on board that plane a couple of weeks ago. But perhaps it's not the moment to go into that.
That was dramatic.
And they're the Prince and Princess of Wales. But I should say that joining us in the studio is the former Attorney General, Sir Michael Ellis, who, of course, has seen many of these state occasions as years have gone by. This is an important moment for relations between France and the United Kingdom.
It very much is, Tom, and I think what this reminds me of, actually, is the Entente Cordiale that the King's predecessor, Edward VII, was largely responsible for, and Queen Victoria's son, who reigned between 1901 and 1910, one of the main achievements of his reign is thought to be improvements in relations between this country and France, known as the Entente Cordiale. In fact, some of the military music that we're going to hear played shortly is actually called Entente Cordiale, when the inspection of the Guard is going to take place in the quadrangle shortly. So it's an important moment. Relations between, of course, this country and France haven't always been, over the course of history, there's probably been more hostility than there has been friendliness. But here, this is an example following of the last 100 years where there has been this special relationship.
And let's be frank, a lot of people watching all of this will want to know, is the migrant crisis going to be sorted out by all of this?
Well, I very much doubt that's going to be on the menu. Cameron was just talking about the, no doubt, very elegant menu. I don't think that's going to be on the menu for the early part of today. Not quite yet. But I think it will be part of what the officials will be talking about and what the Prime Minister, no doubt, will be raising with the President of the French Republic later today when they meet. But we're seeing now one of those things, of course, that this country does really well, which is the pomp and ceremony, the military spectacle. There are 70 horses on parade, over 600 military personnel. There are RAF, Navy, Marines and Army, all taking part. And it's going to be actually a very important occasion for His Majesty the King. He has a couple of state visits under his belt so far, and a couple more to do. And of course, on the schedule, President Trump is scheduled to arrive, we believe, later this year. But this is an opportunity, I think, for us to really give grade A treatment to a visiting head of state. And over the last 100 years, there have been quite a few state visits by France, some of them really quite noticeable for their impact. And I think we're going to see, hopefully, some advancing relations between our countries, because they haven't always politically been eye to eye in recent years.
No, they haven't, and yet it seems that both the King and the Prime Minister have sort of made it a priority to perhaps ameliorate relations between our countries. One of the King's first state visits as head of state was to go to France, and similarly, the Prime Minister has been boasting about this new sort of terms of a reset deal with the European Union as a whole. I mean, this all looks like it's sort of laying the groundwork for something deeper when it comes to political collaboration. And of course, the President of France, I believe, is visiting Downing Street not once, but at least twice in this 3-day visit, on separate days. I mean, there will be serious work done, as well as all of the sort of ceremony that we're seeing now.
Absolutely, Tom. And actually, over the decades, you've seen quite important political announcements made during state visits. They separate them, of course, the royal part and the political part, as you would expect. But it'd be wrong to assume that no politics takes place in these royal visits. Not with the sovereign, of course, but they do take place, and big announcements can be made, including sometimes big economic announcements of deals between countries. And they have led to controversy in the past. I mean, one of the famous occasions in 1971 was when the Emperor of Japan visited, and it was a bit too soon after World War II, and it was one of the chillier state visits. And there are stories of how the emperor, the Japanese emperor, who was the same emperor, of course, who had fought this country in World War II in 1971, and the crowds were deathly silent as the carriages travelled through London. And it was quite difficult. Some people turned their backs on the emperor. That's going all the way back to 1971. So, and famously also, Nicolae Ceausescu, the Romanian dictator, was given a state visit in the late 70s, I think it was, and that was also highly controversial even at the time. And of course, he was later ousted by the Romanian people in a bloody coup. So they haven't always been plain sailing, but I'm sure this one will be nothing like, Emily, nothing like as controversial as those.
I think, I mean, it could be, I fear, that perhaps we get some kind of announcement on closer ties with the European Union, because that's what Macron is after, and absolutely zilch when it comes to illegal crossings.
Well, we'll have to see what happens there, and that will be part of the Prime Minister's agenda. As far as this morning is concerned, and this afternoon, I think what the King will want to do, because the King is a great lover of France, and culturally...
He speaks French.
He speaks French, as of course did the late Queen. And I think we'll hear later today him speaking some French at the banquet. I'm sure that much of his speech will be in French.
It was, of course, when he visited the Chamber of Deputies and spoke before the French Parliament. Much of that speech, perhaps even a majority of my reckoning, was indeed in French.
It really is impressive, Tom, isn't it? And, of course, he later spoke German when he visited the German Parliament. He spoke Italian.
It's only impressive because we're so awful at languages in this country.
Our politicians can barely speak English on top, but I think it's very impressive to have a royal family that can speak English.
It is good.
And these other languages. But I think the Queen there is in her favourite colour. I'm pretty sure green is her favourite colour.
Shall we pause for a moment and just listen in to the anthem and watch the expression on these leaders' faces?
Guard of honor! Shoulder! Arms!
And we've heard the French anthem there played for a second time as the French president arrives at Windsor Castle. We're expecting the British anthem to be played very shortly indeed. Of course, the Guard of Honour is taking place before the president and the king. The president really representing the head of state of France next to the head of state of the United Kingdom.
And I believe we have Cameron Walker as well on the line for us, our royal correspondent. Cameron, we're currently looking at pictures of the King Charles, and the President Macron of France walking together. Can you tell us more?
Yes, you can see live pictures, as you were saying, Emily, of your screen, of the King inviting President Macron to inspect a Guard of Honour here at Windsor Castle. That large Guard of Honour, founded by detachments from the Grenadier Guards, commanded by Major Jake Sayers, and F Company Scots Guards, commanded by Major Thomas Strachan of the London Central Garrison, colours are being carried. You may just be able to see on the top right of your screen, where it's now not in shot, of one of those colours. But this is custom, isn't it, of the pomp and pageantry, inviting a foreign head of state to inspect troops of the armed forces of the United Kingdom. Of course, particularly significant given the fact that both Britain and France are two NATO allies. And of course, defence is going to be one of the key themes of the speeches in tonight's state banquet, and indeed the political discussions taking place later on today and indeed over the next couple of days in London. As you've been saying, Tom, we have had both national anthems that have played, and the King's Troop Royal Horse Artillery and Captain's Escort of the Household Cavalry Mounted Regiment have already ridden past His Majesty and the French President. And the Guard of Honour, of course, have been rehearsing all of yesterday in not particularly nice weather. Today, for the actual event, much nicer here in Windsor. A proper British welcome, perhaps. And just in the centre of your screens now, you see the President of France and the King walking behind the President of France. If you remember a few years ago, where Queen Elizabeth II invited President Trump of the United States during his first term of office to inspect a Guard of Honour, President Trump was heavily criticised for walking in front of Her Majesty the Queen. And as you can see on your screens here, President Macron of France is walking in front of His Majesty the King. Now, I understand that there shouldn't really have been perhaps so much of a hoo-ha around what President Trump did, as this is perhaps custom that the King, as the host, gives way to the foreign head of state, of which is the honoured guest at Windsor Castle. So that is what you are seeing on your screens now, with the Grenadier Guards and the Scots Guards being inspected in the upper ward of Windsor Castle.
Because I think we'll all remember the absolute outrage from almost all corners about Donald Trump walking in front of the Queen. And yet, clearly, Michael Ellis, this was protocol.
Yes.
Tom, you're right, and so is Cameron. The fact is that that was unfair, that criticism of President Trump, because the reality is this is an honour for the visiting head of state. And therefore, it is, on this occasion, President Macron who is inspecting the Guard. And it's completely in order for him, therefore, to be given the precedence. That's part of being the host and him being the guest. And you see, we're in the quadrangle at the moment of Windsor Castle, and the Nijmegen Company of the Grenadier Guards and the F Company of the Scots Guards are the ones who've been inspected. A brief inspection. Major Jake Sayers there is the officer commanding, and he will have invited President Macron in fluent French. I'm sure he's been practicing. But the tradition is, again, this is all common courtesy. The tradition is whoever the visiting head of state is addressed in his home language, in his home tongue. And so if it was the Emperor of Japan, he would be addressed by the officer commanding in Japanese. No doubt they have to do a bit of practicing for the various languages. But they've now inspected the Guard. There will be more to come. But the music of the inspection we're going to hear is what I was talking about earlier, L'Entente Cordiale. It's a recollection of 120 years ago in 1905, when relations between the French really were secured, where they had previously been quite frosty, of course, in previous centuries. You see now the Blues and Royals are trooping past the royal dais at Windsor in the quadrangle, and there you can see they're wearing their cuirasses, they're called, their silver breastplates. They're in deep Oxford blue, and with red plumes in their silver helmets and the heavily golden aiguillettes. And some lifeguards are also there. The Royal Horse Artillery is also present. But these lifeguards and Blues and Royals, part of the Household Cavalry and the Household Division, and of course regularly asked to perform these functions. There are, as I was saying earlier, 650 military personnel on duty. 380 of them have been lining the streets of Windsor. And, you know, Tom and Emily, the streets of Windsor are actually very used to royal occasions. Not so many state visits. This is the first one in about 11 years, but they're used to royal occasions, and all the shops will be open. There'll be thousands of tourists there. The dais on which the King greeted President Macron was right in front of Windsor railway station, I think, and they're used to the pomp and ceremony of royal visits. But 12 half companies of army detachments have come from Victoria Barracks and Combermere Barracks, with Major General James Bowder of the Household Division, General Officer Commanding Household Division, who also had a leading role in the Trooping the Colour a couple of weeks ago, but was covered here on GBNews. It's part of what we, of course, expect. The quadrangle here at Windsor Castle has been used many times over the centuries. In fact, there's a statue of King Charles II that's an ancient statue, been there since 1679, carved in part the plinth of it by Grinling Gibbons. It used to be in the middle of the grass there, and Queen Victoria had it moved out of the way because it was getting in the way of the soldiers doing their thing. But it's still there in just to one side.
Where is it now? It's just in the corner, is it?
It's in the corner to the left of our screen.
A slightly less splendid position, but it would have been a slightly odd formation of these these guards going sort of moving around it.
Yes. So let's hope that future statues of King Charles III, our current king, are placed more conveniently. But
it's interesting what you say, but sorry to interrupt, about the Donald Trump getting in lots of trouble for apparently breaking royal etiquette. It is quite amusing to look back at some of the headlines. Trump breaks royal etiquette, walks in front of Queen.
Yes.
Trump defied royal protocol while meeting the Queen twice. The Queen shows Donald Trump where to walk and all of this.
I think he was probably trying to be polite, to be fair to him, because he was probably reluctant to walk in front of her because it's a polite thing. But, of course, he got criticised for it. But here we see some of the Household Division now, and, of course, you can tell their regiment by two things at this distance: the spacing of their buttons. If their buttons are in singles, you know that they are from the Coldstream Guards, the Grenadier Guards, forgive me. And then if they are in fives, they're from the Scots Guards. And the Scots Guards don't have any colour in the plumes of their helmets. And that's because they always used to be positioned in the middle of the line. And therefore, because they were in the middle, it wasn't considered they had to have a coloured plume in their bearskins. And so they've just proudly marched past. And there's quite a lot, of course, of police protection as well for this event. It's a very important international event, and Thames Valley Police have got a lot of resources in the area. But the late Queen always used to say, when an American leader once said to her, "Majesty, where are all your bodyguards?" You know, thinking of the Secret Service style, you know, sunglass-wearing bodyguards, she famously said, I've got thousands of bodyguards and they're all around us now. And, of course, they are the Sovereign's guards, so they're doing their thing right now.
Interestingly, and I didn't know this before today, but the Grenadier Guards only adopted the impressive bearskin hats after the Battle of Waterloo.
That's right.
Which perhaps needn't be reminded to the French president on a day like today, but it's all about being impressive in ceremony and on the battlefield too, looking taller than you are, appearing like a sort of larger-than-life military force.
That's right, and of course I think we 200 years ago, we probably found that type of headgear quite impressive, and following the victories of Waterloo and the Napoleonic Wars, we adopted some of those customs, and of course they do look very, very splendid. Not always terribly comfortable to wear, and pretty hot in this sort of weather. Maintained by using shampoo, by the way, Tom and Emily. Yes, they just use ordinary shampoo to clean those bear skins. But what you can see now, it looks like His Majesty is about to step down from the dais, and to the left of where His Majesty is the Norman round tower of Windsor Castle. We can't see it in screen at the moment, but that's where the Royal Archives are kept. And the Governor and Constable of Windsor Castle, who lives in the castle, together with a small number of officials, he lives in the shadow of the Norman Round Tower in a property many centuries old. The current governor is Lieutenant General Philip Jones. He'll be on duty today, and he was appointed just 8 days before we lost Queen Elizabeth II. The late Queen was one of her last appointments. And they're going now into the royal apartments, where I think they're going to be having a private lunch with members of the royal family in the state dining room. And later, I think we'll get an opportunity to see, again, in the green drawing room, and where they'll be shown some artefacts from the previous gift exchanges between the British and the French. And the Lord Chamberlain, of course, is also present, and the bicorn hat there, worn also by one of the senior officials, but
worn in the correct way, because of course back to Waterloo, I mean, this is how Wellington would wear it, whereas of course famously Napoleon would wear it the wrong way round.
Yes, a thwart, I think they call it, a thwart rather than head on. And
so they're heading in for a spot of lunch,
they're heading
essentially
in for
now.
A private lunch.
And so this will only be the royals and President Macron and his wife.
I think that's right, okay. Emily, yes. And I don't think cameras will be allowed in that part.
No.
But we will see them again soon in the green drawing room. A similar green, actually, to Queen Camilla wearing today, that sort of emerald green, where they'll be looking at some of the artefacts that have been exchanged, including, it won't be in the green drawing room, but I believe we're going to be shown a carriage that was gifted in 1844 by the French to Queen Victoria. So they've wheeled it out somewhere for the President to see. And we're getting a better look now of the whole quadrangle. And if we stay with that, you'll see the Norman Tower. There it is. And there's the statue of King Charles II,
yes,
from 1679. And, of course, they've got the big royal standard, the size of a tennis court, that is, flying from the top.
And this is such an important message, I suppose, to hold it in a place like Windsor. Of course, it must be done here because Buckingham Palace is undergoing renovation, but to some extent it is much more poignant for a French president to visit what was originally a Norman castle,
right,
established by William the Conqueror as one of the ring of castles that surrounded the sort of Greater London area in terms of establishing his rule. And of course it was William the Conqueror who was the reason why the menu tonight will be written in French.
That's right.
Why there is sort of a fleur-de-lis on so much royal garmenture. Why so much of our royal family does of course stem from those Norman French traditions.
That's absolutely right, Tom. And, of course, you know, French was and still is, to a large extent, the diplomatic language for the international community. And it took quite a long time before English kings and then British kings decided that they shouldn't also be kings of France. But what we see, of course, there with the royal standard flying above the Norman Tower, as you rightly say, I mean, this was a castle battlement way back by 1070. It was established just 4 years after the Norman conquest. It didn't look anything like this, of course, in 1070. It was a much smaller edifice, but largely developed in the 1200s. By the mid part of the 13th century, it probably would have been recognisable, many parts of it that we see now, and it massively developed by Henry III. Well, the flag there is on top of the what is now the Royal Archives, Tom and Emily, and of course not anybody can go and see the Royal Archives. That's access heavily restricted, permission by the keeper of the Royal Archives, who also happens to be private secretary to the King, a chap called Sir Clive Alderton, who is a lovely man, and he is, in fact, the private secretary to the King and also keeper of the Royal Archives, because you've got to keep those archives safe, Tom and Emily. You don't know, what's in them unless you go and have a look for yourself.
Oh, well, I'm intrigued. I'll have to try and pull his leg. And that flag is the size of a tennis court.
Apparently so.
Wow, that's very large indeed, isn't it? So, Michael Ellis, thank you very much for now. We're going to go back to Cameron Walker, our royal correspondent, who's there in Windsor for us. So the royals and President Macron are heading in for lunch.
Private lunch inside the state dining room, attended by members of the royal family, the French president, Mrs. Macron, and perhaps some other French dignitaries as well. Cameras not allowed in that part of today's proceedings. Afterwards, however, the King will invite the French president to view items related to France from the Royal Collection Trust. As I was saying earlier, 1,000 years of history between the two nations are in the Royal Archives, and some of the items have been, let's say, specially selected by diplomats, and perhaps His Majesty had a say in it as well, although Buckingham Palace at the moment keeping quite tight-lipped as to what items will be on display. But hopefully in the next hour or so, or hour or two even, we should be able to bring those details to you. And then it's a little bit of a rest for the members of the royal family, because the President and First Lady will travel to London to lay a wreath at the tomb of the unknown soldier inside Westminster Abbey. Of course, the President also expected at some point this week to speak to members of the House of Lords and House of Commons. We do know that the President will be off to Lancaster House, which is next door to Buckingham Palace, to meet, we believe, Kemi Badenoch, the leader of the Conservative Party, and Sir Ed Davey, leader of the Liberal Democrats. From the information I have, we are not expecting the French President to meet Nigel Farage, leader of Reform, as one of those opposition party leaders. Of course, the Prime Minister will also be very much high up on the list for President Macron. And then following all of those meetings in London, they will return here to Windsor Castle, where they will actually be staying for the next few days, overnighting in the castle for a magnificent state banquet where speeches will be delivered. We've had a little bit of an insight as to what His Majesty will be saying during that speech, talking about the fact that, talking about the shared ties between Britain and France, saying that we have kind of no borders, talking in a metaphorical sense there, of course. There's been a lot of commentary this morning around whether he was referring to the Channel migrant crisis. Royal sources to me are playing that down, suggesting instead the King is referring to our joint ties when it comes to defence, technology, and indeed climate change as well. The pomp and pageantry is just about wrapping up here. You can just see members of the Household Division marching past my position here, just coming out of Advance Gate. But it is that pomp and pageantry, that soft power that the King musters, that we're going to see on display here today. What there is still a question mark over is the Princess of Wales and her attendance tonight at the state banquet. Kensington Palace still, despite us asking lots and lots this morning, keeping very tight-lipped as to whether the Princess will be in attendance. She hasn't attended a state banquet in well over a year now. Understandably, we know, of course, she had major abdominal surgery and, of course, the subsequent cancer diagnosis. She is now in remission for that cancer diagnosis, but just last week she talked about the roller coaster that she has been on, perhaps a reminder that we should let her take each day as it comes. If we do get confirmation, we will, of course, bring that to you. Who we are expecting to be in attendance is, of course, the King and Queen, Prince of Wales, and some other members of the royal family, alongside government ministers and French dignitaries as well. And usually there's some kind of cultural celebrities invited. There's 160 guests taking part in this state banquet, a 50-metre table inside St George's Hall as well. So it should be quite a display of pomp and pageantry today.
Thank you very much indeed. I do hope, Tom, that we get something out of this, something concrete, something that we can say, because it's wonderful seeing these types of spectacles. It's wonderful seeing the state visit. Parts of it certainly make you proud to be British. Other countries can't fulfil the same sort of thing. But I do hope we get something concrete, because the King will know, Of course, Keir Starmer knows. Then a lot of people will be hoping that some kind of arrangement can be done when it comes to the migrant crisis.
Well, let's be frank about this. The migrant crisis, in terms of boats crossing the Channel, could have been solved years ago had the French allowed the Brits to put the people not back on British soil, but on French soil instead. I mean, it has been years since a single small boat actually reached the shores of Britain. I don't think it's understood enough that these small boats do not make it to our shoreline. What happens is they make it halfway across the Channel and then they're picked up by British boats, by naval vessels, by the RNLI. If those boats just dropped the people back in France rather than taking them all the way to England, well, there wouldn't be a migrant crisis across small boats in any way, shape or form.
I think it's time to demand a refund. £771 million over the last 12 years. Most of that, the vast majority of that, 600-odd million in the last 6 years since this crisis began properly hitting our shores. And what have we seen for it? The French say, oh, well, we've stopped some boats coming over. Well, yes, but they don't deport those people. They don't lock them up, so they just try again to get over here. So it's completely pointless, really. Yeah. I mean, Sir Michael Ellis, would you agree with me that it's time to start asking for some kind of refund, to start playing a bit more hardball, rather than this softly, nicely, Macron, be nice to us?
Yes, I would, frankly. Look, I don't think, if one looks at it from a governmental point of view, that the French can be said to have been particularly friendly during the tenure of President Macron's presidency towards this country. They haven't... I think they've wanted to send a message that, when it comes to Brexit, for example, that it will be very unhelpful for other countries to consider doing something similar. And therefore, they made it their business, along with much of the other European Union countries, to be quite frank, to make things as difficult as possible for Brexit to be done smoothly. They wanted to send that message. And then, as you say, Emily, with the migrant crisis, most people, I think, would imagine that it would have been possible to have done more to assist, that's putting it diplomatically, to assist this country in that endeavour.
This is where the clever and slightly counterintuitive idea of one in, one out might make sense. The French do not want to accept migrants back because, of course, that opens the floodgates. Then they could dump all of their migrants back in Italy, who could then dump all their migrants back in Greece or wherever, you know, you can go back through the chain and then suddenly the whole system breaks down.
And to be fair...
But if there is a system that we say we will take one legal migrant with the proper documentation and papers who has been assessed and processed offshore...
Who claims they've got some spurious family member in this country, so therefore has a right. Most people looking at this picture do not want a one in, one out. They want a no in. No out.
Great, and I want the moon on a stick.
But this isn't going to solve it.
No, but this could stop the boats.
And to be fair, what the French would say, at least what they say, you know, unofficially, is that the British make it too comfortable with benefits and so on. And they would say, well, we can't stop them in the way that you're asking us to.
Don't accept the money, then. Because
it's so attractive for them to come to these shores. So that would be at least part of their unofficial argument, I would have thought.
And yet a lot of that is mandated due to the international treaties we're a party to.
Yeah.
So I think the reality is that, hopefully, if Keir Starmer gets, well, what we would hope would be the way that he would be pushing during this trip, would be some results from this visit, because there's no reason why state visits can't be used to achieve political goals. It's just something separate from the royal part of it. But we're going to see meetings between them, and I think this will not be a success for the Prime Minister if he doesn't walk away with something to show.
I just feel like Keir Starmer always defers to other international leaders. That's how it appears sometimes anyway. Well, we've got a lot more coming up for you on the show, so do stick with us. We'll be back in just a tick.
Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. It's a fine day for most of us with plenty of warm, sunny spells, but cloudier weather will roll into the northwest. Some rain, mostly for Western Scotland and Northern Ireland because of this frontal system toppling in over the top of an area of high pressure which is extending, and that high pressure bringing plenty of fine weather now that low pressure that was responsible for some lively weather through the weekend is moving to the east. Still a brisk breeze running down the North Sea, still the chance of some patchy cloud, perhaps even the odd shower into East Anglia, but mainly early afternoon. Otherwise, all of that weather clears up nicely. Plenty of warm sunny spells with temperatures into the low to mid-20s. Now for Western Scotland and Northern Ireland, the cloud thickens through the afternoon and we'll see some showers moving through by the evening, perhaps even the odd heavy downpour for the Western Isles at this point. But towards central and eastern and southern Scotland, plenty of warm sunny spells hanging on. Northern Ireland, cloudier skies as well, rain lurking just to the northwest. And for West Wales, parts of Cornwall, some areas of clouds start to move in. But for the rest of England and Wales, plenty of fine weather as we end the day. And we keep clear skies by and large, particularly across central and eastern parts of the UK overnight. Cloudier towards the north and the west. And we've got those outbreaks of rain moving into western and central Scotland. Some patchy rain for Northern Ireland, northwest England as well. Where we've got the cloud, it's going to be a mild night, 14 or 15 Celsius. Perhaps a little cool towards the southeast as we start off Wednesday under those clear skies, but plenty of sunshine, so temperatures rising quickly through the morning. And another fine day is expected across much of England and Wales. I think cloudier conditions for many compared with Tuesday, but even that cloud will disappear into the afternoon. We'll keep some light rain in the far north and northwest, but it is warming up everywhere.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
We're kick-starting summer with your chance to win our biggest cash prize to date, as there's an incredible £54,321 in tax-free cash to be won. What would you spend it on? A brand new car, the holiday of a lifetime, or just sit back, relax and remove some of those day-to-day financial stresses? For another chance to win, text cash to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB14 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 1st of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Back in 2015, Thornton and Cleveley's resident Emma Shepherd noticed the grass in her garden wasn't growing. Within months, she had to put down Alfie, one of her beloved dogs who had developed throat cancer. Just weeks later, she developed a lesion on her back, which would later be diagnosed as skin cancer. She knew then that something wasn't right.
I wasn't really aware of the history of the ICI site when I took the property. I did so much investigation. I had the ground tested with my own money. There was high levels of metals in there and some obviously cancerous carcinogenics in there. They actually nicknamed me Erin Brockovich because I was so all over it.
Last year, a joint investigation was launched by the Environment Agency and the local council. That was following the discovery of PFOA, a man-made chemical that potentially causes cancer. Both parties told GB News they are now working together on this matter, whilst the company under investigation for the potential release of the substance had this to say. AGC Chemicals Europe sets the highest standards for itself and takes its commitments to the local community and to the environment extremely seriously. They added that they voluntarily phased out the use of PFOA in the UK by early 2012. Release of the substance was within the permits held by AGC Chemicals Europe at the time and also UK legislation in place at the time. And yet, 2 months ago, residents within a kilometre of the site received this letter from the council, advising them not to consume anything grown in their gardens due to potential PFOA contamination.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 1 o'clock on Tuesday, the 8th of July. I'm Emily Carver.
And I'm Tom Harwood.
Well, a historic visit begins today as King Charles welcomes President Macron of France for a 3-day tour. He warns of complex threats facing both of our nations, but with immigration high on the political agenda, could the King's comments on borders carry extra weight?
Elsewhere in the news today, Norman Tebbit, one of Margaret Thatcher's most loyal supporters and cabinet ministers during her years of power, has died today at the age of 94.
And is it a make-or-break moment for Sir Keir Starmer? The Prime Minister scrambles to salvage a key migrant returns deal with France, this one-in, one-out scheme, but with record channel crossings and a sweltering horizon on the horizon. Will this agreement survive?
And was President Macron right to apparently snub meeting with Reform Party leader Nigel Farage? We'll have that debate.
We will indeed. And elsewhere, the devastating truth laid bare. The first official report into the Post Office Horizon scandal is out, exposing the personal tragedies and systemic failures behind one of Britain's worst ever miscarriages of justice. Why did it take so long to act?
And the families of 3 young girls murdered in the Southport stabbing attack demand real change as a public inquiry opens today. With harrowing questions over how a teenager come to carry out such violence, could this be a turning point in how we tackle youth extremism?
Yes, a big day for France, a big day for this country as well with this state visit. 3 days it will be. I do wonder, we've got Sir Michael Ellis as well in the studio as well, former Attorney General, of course. But I do wonder, King Charles, OK, so we've got snippets of what he's going to say at this state banquet speech. And it's quite interesting what he's saying. He's going to be talking about how we face a multitude of complex threats emanating from multiple directions. OK, yes, true, both our countries do. He's going to be talking about, and this is where it gets a little bit controversial, and I've just actually lost the line. He essentially says... He says that
the challenges don't respect borders.
Exactly. The challenges don't respect borders. And I'm sitting here thinking, isn't that the problem? Isn't that the problem, that currently we don't appear to have a border between France and the United Kingdom, and that perhaps if he's talking about issues like climate change, defence and energy security, he should be a little more explicit, rather than these vague sort of statements that mean absolutely nothing.
I think people are over-interpreting what the King is saying. I know it's caused a splash in
he says, these challenges, no borders, no fortress can protect us against them this time. Well, maybe we need a fortress.
Well, I think there are lots of challenges that know no borders. And
but he hasn't named any of them there. Now, he may go on to name them. He may go on to name them. But then why make these sort of vague statements?
This is a difficult tightrope for the King to walk, isn't it, Sir Michael? Because, of course, he's got to say something, but he can't be too specific in what he says because that breaches all sorts of protocol.
Why use the word borders? Come on, Sir Michael Ellis, when that is one of the key issues front and centre of the political agenda.
Well, I think what you have to bear in mind, Tom and Emily, is that when the King gives a speech like this, it will have been passed to the nth degree. It will have been, every word will have been carefully chosen. So in that sense, Emily, you're right to raise it, because there are issues, of course, in any big speech that the sovereign will make, not least at a state banquet in white tie and tails with the President of France sitting right next to him. Also, of course, the Foreign Office will, and therefore the government, will have played a major part in the compilation of this speech. So they will be wanting to send various subliminal, maybe not such subliminal messages. And well, I think, to be fair, we ought to wait and see what the whole speech entails.
That's true, yes.
Because when we're given snippets like this, it can lead to the wrong impression. But these things are very carefully thought through. And, of course, the King will want to relay his personal affection for things French culture, art, history, cuisine, and so on.
Oh, that's fabulous.
That's fabulous.
That's absolutely fabulous.
It's the politics.
We all love France. It's a beautiful country.
I'm very glad that French cuisine knows no borders.
Absolutely, yeah. Is that what he's talking about? Is that what he's talking
isn't that
about?
the marvellous thing about a sovereign? I mean, anyone can interpret into that sort of slightly vague statement whatever they want, because there are lots of things that know no borders.
Yes, like
but then there are some
climate
things that should know borders.
And security, of course, does know no borders, because the terrorists themselves don't respect any borders, and therefore they're not hindered by that. So, in that sense, of course, what the King is apparently going to say is quite correct.
OK, well, perhaps I'm being a little harsh. Let us know at home what you make of it. gbnews.com/your say, but it is the headlines.
Good afternoon, it's 5 minutes past 1, your latest news headlines from the GB newsroom. The King has welcomed French President Emmanuel Macron to the UK for his 3-day state visit, starting with a ceremony at Windsor Castle. The Prince and Princess of Wales greeted President Macron and his wife Bridget as their plane landed at RAF Northolt, before King Charles and Queen Camilla welcomed them both to Windsor. It's the first UK state visit by a French president since 2008. King Charles says the UK and France both face complex threats, adding that the challenges the two countries face, quote, know no borders. At a summit on Thursday between the two countries, immigration is set to be the centrepiece, as Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer aims to get a one-in, one-out migrant returns deal with France over the line. A state banquet at Windsor Castle will take place this evening, while President Macron will also address Parliament. The first volume of the final report into the Post Office Horizon scandal has been published, concluding that at least 13 postmasters may have taken their own lives. More than 900 sub-postmasters were wrongfully prosecuted by the Post Office between 1999 and 2015 in what's been labelled as the worst miscarriage of justice in British legal history. The first part of the report, published today, also found that 59 postmasters considered ending their own lives, and that officials knew that the Horizon software could be, quote, illusory. Business and Trade Secretary Jonathan Reynolds said that he welcomed the publication of the report and that he is committed to ensuring wronged sub-postmasters are given full, fair and prompt redress. Also today, junior doctors in England have voted in favour of taking strike action over a pay dispute. That's according to the British Medical Association. Resident doctors, otherwise known as junior doctors, are seeking a 29% pay rise. There are fears that the industrial action will now cause prolonged disruption in the NHS, with walkouts potentially lasting until January next year. Number 10 has said this lunchtime that resident doctors have had a pay rise of 28.9% over the past 3 years, adding that it was disappointing that they wanted to strike. The Prime Minister's thoughts are with the family of Lord Tebbit, who was a major figure in British politics and will be missed by many, Downing Street has said. Lord Tebbit, former Conservative Party chairman and Cabinet Minister under Margaret Thatcher, died peacefully yesterday evening. He was first elected as a Conservative MP for Epping in 1970, before entering the House of Lords in 1992. Lord Tebbit and his wife were both nearly killed in the IRA bombing of the Grand Hotel in Brighton in 1984, injuries which left his wife paralysed for the rest of her life. In a statement, Lord Tebbit's son William said that the family asked for their privacy to be respected at this time, and that a further statement regarding funeral arrangements will be made in due course. Conservative Party leader Kemi Badenoch paid tribute to the late politician.
The Conservative family is mourning Lord Tebbit's loss. He was an icon. We respected him for so many reasons. The battles he fought during the Thatcher government, but probably the most inspiring thing was watching the aftermath of the 1984 Brighton bomb and how he responded to a terrorist attack from the IRA. Just staying stoic, staying brave, showing lots of courage, but most importantly, looking after his wife, who was severely disabled from that terrorist attack. He put family first. He always exemplified personal responsibility. He was the embodiment of what a Conservative should be, and we're going to miss him very much.
And to America, where at least 104 people have now been confirmed dead following flash flooding across the US state of Texas. The bodies of 56 adults and 28 children have been found in Kerr County, while fatalities have also been recorded in 5 other counties across the state. Authorities say at least 41 people are still missing in Texas, including 10 girls from a Christian summer camp. President Trump will reportedly visit the region on Friday. Those are your latest GB News headlines. More from me in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
My Claim Group sponsors the GB News Finance Report.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.3589 and €1.1577. The price of gold is £2,449.24 per ounce, and the FTSE 100's at 8,812 points.
My Claim Group sponsors the GB News Finance Report.
Good afternoon, Britain. It is 10 minutes past 1. Of course, we're across that historic state visit from the President of France today. But while the President is having a nice little lunch with the King, we thought we'd dive into some more stories.
Yes, of course. The news from earlier today that Tory grandee Lord Norman Tebbit has died at the age of 94.
Well, Lord Tebbit was one of Margaret Thatcher's most loyal supporters during her years in power and was perhaps best known for surviving a 1984 bomb attack on her government during party conference in Brighton.
Yes, well, the former Prime Minister Boris Johnson has sent his very own tribute to us here at GB News. Let's take a listen.
Norman Tebbit was an absolute hero who took on socialist lunacies like the closed shop, which said that you had to be a member of a union in order to have a certain job, and he took on the union barons, helped to pave the way for Britain's revival in the 1980s and 1990s, and at a time when Labour is disastrously trying to reverse those reforms, it's vital to remember why he said what he did. The most famous thing he said was that in the 1930s, when his father was unemployed, he didn't riot, said Norman Tebbit. He got on his bike and he looked for work. And everybody said that was a totally heartless, cruel thing to say. But actually it was because Norman Tebbit supported the values of thrift and energy and self-reliance rather than a culture of easy entitlement. And today, under this Labour government, we need the values of Norman Tebbit more than ever.
A strong statement there from the former Prime Minister. Let's discuss it now with our political editor, Christopher Hope, who joins us live from Downing Street. Christopher, a titan of Thatcherism has left us today, but of course it wasn't just his multiple cabinet roles throughout the Thatcher years, his spitting image portrayal as a bit of a bruiser with that leather jacket, but also, of course, his later years as a sort of reinvented political figure, a Telegraph blogger.
Yes, hi Tom, hi Emily. Yes, he really was. I had the good fortune to have lunch with him, when he was that kind of reinvented figure. He did a cookbook, I think, about game, how to cook game appropriately, and he was a really entertaining person. Not at all the angry person that you saw on Spitting Image, and was trying to kind of he's looked back now as that kind of bother boy, which is the image promoted by Spitting Image as being this kind of the Chingford skinhead. I mean, he certainly was an aggressive person politically. I mean, he wanted people to get back to work. He wanted people to have self-reliance, do it yourself, don't rely on the state. I think that's why his loss is being felt quite keenly in Westminster today. We've heard earlier from Kemi Badenoch, the Tory leader. Just now, the number 10 have given us a statement from a number 10 spokesman. They say this, that the PM's thoughts are with Norman Tebbit's children and family at this difficult time. Lord Tebbit was clearly a major figure in politics during the 1980s. Many will remember the great strength he showed in the face of the atrocious IRA bombing and the courage he and his wife, that's his wife Margaret, showed in the aftermath. He will be missed by many. And there were two sides to Norman Tebbit. There was that kind of the spine, the backbone, I think, of the Thatcher agenda. The get back to work, get on your bike, get some work done, earn your family a living wage. That's where he stood for. But privately, he was the man who cared for his wife Margaret for decades, who was, of course, paralysed in the Brighton bombing in 1984. Of course, staying in the Grand Hotel, very near where Margaret Thatcher was. So there's two sides to Norman Tebbit. He was a very gentleman muscle man privately, but a bit of a bruiser back in the 80s. I should bring you news from the lobby meeting I've just been to, by the way. Of course, we know that the PM is now the King is now meeting with President Macron. We expect later to see President Macron addressing both houses of Parliament, actually this afternoon. There's been a cabinet meeting in Downing Street today that's been addressed by the three heads of our security services, MI6, MI5 and GCHQ. That meeting, not surprisingly, what was discussed was classified, but we can tell you that the issues of state threats to the UK, terrorism and cyber security were all discussed. Bridget Phillipson, the Education Secretary, used that meeting with the Cabinet to tell them more about the reforms to send. We discussed that yesterday on your show. She said to the Cabinet that the driving principle of these changes they want to bring about are to secure better outcomes for people. Work's underway. They will do this with care, because so many families of the 600,000 children who do have that SEND provision, special needs provision, they are worried about having that funding cut as a result of this review. But again, that's not till the autumn, but that is a bubbling issue for many Labour backbenchers. And on the issue of junior doctors, now called resident doctors, Wes Streeting, the Health Secretary, will meet today with the BMA and urge them not to strike. The government says they will not reopen the pay settlement for 2025-2026. Number 10 says they've had a pay rise of 28.9%. That's 28.9% over 3 years for these junior doctors, these resident doctors. There's no more money for them. The government says only patients will suffer from any strike action, and it can't be more generous than they've been already. And you mentioned the King's speech tonight at the Guildhall, briefed overnight to GB News and other media. That speech, we are not told whether Number 10 has sign-off. I heard Sir Michael Ellis telling you there that normally that is given to Number 10 to approve. That is normally the case, but for the journalists asking that question of Downing Street, they won't tell us if that was agreed to or signed off by 10 Downing Street. It's the King's speech, Number 10 say.
Very curious. Well, Christopher Hope, thanks indeed for bringing us all of that live from Downing Street.
Interesting, they wouldn't answer that question.
Yeah, very interesting. Very briefly, I just wanted to pay tribute to Norman Tebbit. He was one of the first politicians I met, actually. He came to talk at my school. Oh. I was picked to have lunch with him about 15 years ago. And he had such a wealth of knowledge, such generosity, such time for some precocious schoolboys.
I imagine you were very precocious.
Yeah, no, I think he will be sorely missed.
Oh, well, that's lovely. You must share with us what you spoke about, if you can remember what you spoke about. Was it about what you were doing at school?
Well, no. It was all about the 1980s, but also applying. I mean, it was very early coalition government years. I think we actually had some agreement on some issues, but some ferocious debate on some social issues.
Oh, he allowed you to debate him?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, well, that's a good man.
That was absolutely...
That's a good man.
And I mean, what kind of senior politician, I mean, would just sort of have that time, that generosity, but also that respect towards some, you know, precocious kids and actually have the back and forth.
I bet you tried to... I bet, Tom, you tried to beat him in an argument, didn't you? You tried to beat him in a debate, didn't you, Tom? You can't help yourself.
And beat everyone in an argument.
You can't help yourself. May I also just make a point about junior doctors? They're wanting another 29% pay rise.
No, it's extraordinary, isn't it?
It's extraordinary. We'll cover some more of that, I'm sure, this afternoon.
But, of course, the King and Queen have officially welcomed the French President Emmanuel Macron and his wife Bridget to Windsor Castle at the start of this 3-day state visit.
Yes, the couple were escorted through the town in a ceremonial carriage procession, and upon arrival at the castle, they were honoured with a royal salute.
Well, our man on the ground is, of course, Cameron Walker, live from Windsor. Cameron, what can you tell us?
Hi, Tom and Emily. Yes, we have had all of that ceremonial welcome, haven't we, with the Guard of Honour. We have had the Grenadier Guards and the Scots Guards be inspected by President Macron of France, having been invited by King Charles. The President's walking in front of the King, as is custom. Of course, you remember 5 or 6 years ago, President Trump got a little bit of bad press for walking in front of Queen Elizabeth II, but President Macron has just done exactly the same thing with King Charles. It is because, of course, that is custom. You can see pictures on your screen now of the King and President Macron riding in the State Landau carriage, the 1902 State Landau carriage, up Datchet Street through the Windsor town centre. Behind those carriages was the Queen alongside Brigitte Macron, the First Lady of France, and then in the carriage behind that was the Prince and Princess of Wales with a couple of French government ministers. Now, in terms of the cheering crowds, the loudest cheer by far was for the Prince and Princess of Wales. A witness has told me that some people were actually waving French baguettes out of the window on the Windsor High Street. Perhaps a little bit of a nod to the French president there. Of course, this is the soft power in action, isn't it? It is King Charles rolling out the red carpet, quite literally and metaphorically, of course, trying to perhaps butter up the visiting head of state that is the French president ahead of the tough political negotiations which will be taking place later this week in Downing Street. Picture on the screen now of the King and President Macron inspecting that Guard of Honour. What's happening right now inside Windsor Castle is a private lunch. After that, we're expecting a viewing of French items inside the royal collection. A couple of quick notes to end on. You may have noticed that the King's right eye is looking a little bit red and swollen. I'm told that he had a burst blood vessel overnight. Nothing to worry about. It's nothing to do with his cancer diagnosis. Of course, he's still undergoing a weekly cycle of cancer treatment. I'm told it's just one of those things that's happened, and it's just unfortunate that it has happened today when he's got a load of cameras on him for the French state visit. The other question that we still don't know the answer to is whether or not the Princess of Wales, having attended this morning's proceedings, is going to be at the state banquet later on this evening. Kensington Palace are not ruling it in or out right now, so we'll have to wait and see whether the Princess can make it. Of course, last week she was in a hospital during a visit and was talking about the roller coaster that she has been on following her remission and ending that cancer treatment. In terms of a state banquet, the King and President Macron will be delivering speeches, and the King's speech is expected to emphasise the close ties between Britain and France. He talks about, we're expecting him to say, the kind of the lack of borders perhaps between Britain and France, not talking perhaps about the migrant crossings. Royal sources indicating to me that he's talking perhaps about our shared ties when it comes to defence, technology and climate change.
Well, Cameron Walker, thank you very much indeed for now. Outside Windsor Castle for us. A quick word to Sir Michael Ellis, our former Attorney General, who's in the studio with us. Any thoughts?
Well, Emily, this is, of course, as we were saying earlier, a really important state occasion and ceremonial occasion. And I know that the King and the rest of the royal family will recognise it for that importance, but it's also politically important. And I think the Prime Minister will want to achieve something from this visit because it's pretty much the grade A show that we as a country can put on for a visiting dignitary. And there are various layers and levels of visits that people make all the time to this country, but a state visit when you're officially the guest of the sovereign is the best offer we can make. And I think we'll want some return for that, and we'll see in the next couple of days whether Keir Starmer can achieve that.
Well, he said he's a hard man.
Yeah.
So we shall see.
I think he said he's a hard word beginning with B and ending with D.
Yeah, I decided not to say that. I thought it would be unnecessary.
Yeah. I mean, it is interesting, this state visit diplomacy. We're getting a trade deal from Trump out of it. What are we going to get from Macron? I mean, we should start offering more of these things.
I don't know.
They've been marvellous.
I think we need to play a bit more hardball. Anyway, there is still plenty of time to grab your chance to win our biggest cash prize. It's £54,321. Here's how to enter.
You have the chance to win our biggest cash prize to date in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. As there's an incredible £54,321 in tax-free cash to be won. What would you spend it on? A brand new car, the holiday of a lifetime, or just the chance to sit back, relax and remove some of those day-to-day financial stresses? £54,321 in tax-free cash has to be won. For another chance to win £54,321 cash, text cash to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB14 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 1st of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Five hosts, 5 opinions, 5 fearless debates, 5 unfiltered takes on the day's news.
5 reasons not to be anywhere else on Saturday night.
This is the Saturday 5. You got me. You got me good there. Britain's biggest Saturday night TV show. It's not a bad brand. Yeah. Uncensored. Very, very racy tonight on the unpredictable. What did she say? Can you translate it for us?
And always entertaining.
And how can a country go from being led by William Wallace Saturday nights from 6 p.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
You're going to want to stay tuned, trust me.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
On this day, 4 years ago, GB News was born, launching our first live broadcast on June the 13th, 2021. Let's take a look back at some of our earlier memories.
If you've just switched on, a very warm welcome to you. I am Alistair Stewart, and until 3 p.m. this afternoon, I'll be keeping you company, along with friends and, I hope, friendly guests. I hope you'd agree that we've had a strong hour of debate and discussion so far, but there's lots more still to come. GB News is all about you, our viewers. Any burning questions or stories that you think we need to cover, no matter how big or small, we really do want to hear from you.
Well, we can now speak with former GB News presenter Alistair Stewart. Alistair, thank you so much for joining me. Thinking back to 4 years ago, what did you think the channel's prospects were? Did you think it would be a success?
I did. Thank you so much for having me on, and a very happy birthday to you, one of the many brilliant faces, as we call it in the trade, presenting programmes, but also to the absolutely wonderful team of technicians that you've got behind you, making sure that this all gets on air very smoothly. And we've not only hung on in there, but we've now got GB News Radio as well. Online, we're huge. We get quite good numbers on viewing, very, very good numbers on listening, well ahead some of the other competitors. I do remember when Murdoch launched Talk, there were quite a few people in the newsroom who were nervous, not because they were so good, but because Murdoch had so much more money than we did. We've seen them off. They're virtually dead in the water now, and we are thriving, celebrating 4 years of triumphal and brilliant journalism.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Who is he? What's he doing there?
They already know who you are, though.
Don't miss this special reunion. Eamon and Anne together again, only on GB News Breakfast this weekend from 6 a.m.
And is that a gardening tan?
No, it's a cypress tan.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 27 minutes past 1. Now, small boat crossings have soared past 20,000 this year already. That's 50% more than at the same point last year, all despite the UK giving France £450 million of your money to stop them.
Well, actually, I think it's 657 million since 2018. But, you know, what's 100 million here or there?
It depends when you start the count. But we're joined now to debate whether we should get a refund for this money or not by Reform campaigner and former MP Marco Longhi and the Labour councillor Sebastian Salek. OK, let's start with you, Marco. Should we get our money back?
Of course we should get our money back. Tom, Emily, good afternoon. You know, it's a heck of a lot of money, isn't it? Best part of £700 million now. So all that we've really got for that is extra votes, 50% more illegal immigrants, and tons of broken promises. But here's the thing. I would really like to submit to you that a sovereign state should not be outsourcing its border control to another country. And especially not one that cashes in our checks while waving the votes across. We're just simply funding failure. And it needs to stop.
OK, well, let's throw that to Sebastian. Can you argue with any of that?
Yeah, look, I can completely see why you would want your money back. If you bought something and it didn't do what it promised, you would ask for a refund. The reality, though, is that we're in the negotiation. And the question really is, how badly do you want the deal to come off? How badly do you want France's help stopping the boats? The reality is we're an island. We're going to need other people, other countries to chip in. And the deal we're seeing in the papers is already 50-50. It may not come off. And if it doesn't, we're in a really difficult position. We need France's help and we need to get this deal across the line.
That's a point, isn't it, Marco? Ultimately, the way we stop the boats is by returning people to France rather than anywhere else, and the only way we do that is with French permission.
Well, yes, and how long have we been negotiating on that very point? It's just not going to happen, is it? Look, if Macron was such an ally, why does he still refuse to let British officers patrol those beaches? We have no say, no control, and no results as a result. So do we want to carry on the way we've been talking about it for the last 4 or 5 years or longer? The British public deserves much better than this farce. We must stop the cash giveaway, take back control of our borders, and I'll tell you what, nobody will defend Britain better than Britain can. We need to stop this continuous argument that somehow these negotiations are going to end up in a better result. I don't recall a time, I mean, we are allies with NATO, with France, but I don't recall a time when France didn't put its interests first over the British interests.
Yeah, that's
so let's carry on this negotiation if you want.
OK, well, so, Sebastian, I don't know if you've seen, but a report by the House of Commons Library was published this week, and they say that there is basically no publicly available information about how all this money is actually spent and monitored, and apparently UK authorities are just refusing freedom of information requests when people ask to find out how this money is being spent. We don't know where it's going, Sebastian.
We don't, but I think if you're going to start looking at where money is going, you want to wind the clock back a bit. I would start with Rwanda, frankly. £700 million wasted there. A big chunk of that went to the Rwandan government. Why not start by asking for that money back? If we're going to go down that line of asking for refunds here and there, start in a priority order rather than going into an active negotiation, which could easily fall apart.
OK, Marco is shaking his head there.
I've got to come back on that. Rwanda was absolutely ready to go when Keir Starmer became Prime Minister and decided to trash it. He never had a chance of being implemented. And when I was in the House of Commons and there was a very serious proposition coming forward with Rwanda, and the news was then displayed in France that could actually happen, all of a sudden we had about 3 or 4 weeks in pretty decent weather of the boats not coming over anymore. We need to implement a scenario in which if you come across to the UK illegally, there is absolutely no quarter for you. You will not be processed in the UK. We need that deterrent. That deterrent must be there. And Keir Starmer just threw that away. There's no point talking about the money that went to Rwanda. Yes, it was a lot of money, but it was about to be tested. Starmer pulled the rug from under the British public's feet over that.
OK, let's have a final word to you, Sebastian Salek. What do you make of that?
Well, I mean, Rwanda was ruled illegal. The judges had their say. But what I'd say is if you want to stop the boats, this deal is what's going to get us across the line. So let's engage...
Hang on. Rwanda was ruled unlawful on the process of refoulement, which then Parliament passed a law to undo. So it was lawful after the passage of the Rwanda Act, by definition.
Maybe we didn't see the full judicial process play out there, but the fact of the matter is we have to engage with the French. We have to get this deal across the line. Okay. That's the only way we're going to stop people coming across and people coming here who have the right to be here. It's the perfect swap.
OK, we're just paying on the hope that eventually we'll find some kind of negotiated agreement. Well, here's hoping. Sebastian Salek, thank you very much, and Marco Longhi too. Thank you very much indeed for your time, both to you. So there you go.
It does make sense, you know, if
what, to continue paying?
No, if France does grant us the right to dump people back in France, it's a hell of a lot better than dumping them all the way in Rwanda. The only reason we were going to dump people in Rwanda is because the French wouldn't take them back in France.
Well, lots more coming up on today's show. Do get involved. Was President Macron right to apparently snub a meeting with Reform leader Nigel Farage? Big question there. We'll get some takes on that one too after the news with Katie.
Good afternoon. The headlines at 1:33. French President Emmanuel Macron and wife Brigitte have arrived in the UK for their 3-day state visit. The King and Queen welcomed them to Windsor. The first volume of the final report into the Post Office Horizon scandal has been published, concluding that at least 13 postmasters may have taken their own lives. Junior doctors in England have voted in favour of taking strike action over a pay dispute, the British Medical Association said earlier today. Former Conservative Party chairman and cabinet minister under Margaret Thatcher, Norman Tebbit, has died at the age of 94. Tory party leader Kemi Badenoch paid tribute.
He was the embodiment of what a Conservative should be, and we're going to miss him very much.
And the chairman of Marks & Spencer said that the cyber attack on their company involved sophisticated impersonation, adding that the business is still in rebuild mode. Archie Norman spoke at the Business and Trade Committee. Those are the latest headlines for now. More news at the top of the hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hi there and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. It's a fine day for most of us with plenty of warm, sunny spells, but cloudier weather will roll into the northwest. Some rain, mostly for Western Scotland and Northern Ireland because of this frontal system toppling in over the top of an area of high pressure which is extending, and that high pressure bringing plenty of fine weather now that low pressure that was responsible for some lively weather through the weekend is moving to the east. Still a brisk breeze running down the North Sea, still the chance of some patchy cloud, perhaps even the odd shower into East Anglia, but mainly early afternoon. Otherwise, all of that weather clears up nicely. Plenty of warm, sunny spells with temperatures into the low to mid-20s. Now for Western Scotland and Northern Ireland, the cloud thickens through the afternoon and we'll see some showers moving through by the evening, perhaps even the odd heavy downpour for the Western Isles at this point. But towards central and eastern and southern Scotland, plenty of warm sunny spells hanging on. Northern Ireland, cloudier skies as well, rain lurking just to the northwest. And for West Wales, parts of Cornwall, some areas of clouds start to move in. But for the rest of England and Wales, plenty of fine weather as we end the day. And we keep clear skies by and large, particularly across central and eastern parts of the UK overnight. Cloudier towards the north and the west. And we've got those outbreaks of rain moving into western and central Scotland. Some patchy rain for Northern Ireland, northwest England as well. Where we've got the cloud, it's going to be a mild night, 14 or 15 Celsius. Perhaps a little cool towards the southeast as we start off Wednesday under those clear skies, but plenty of sunshine, so temperatures rising quickly through the morning. And another fine day is expected across much of England and Wales. I think cloudier conditions for many compared with Tuesday, but even that cloud will disappear into the afternoon. We'll keep some light rain in the far north and northwest, but it is warming up everywhere.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
Good afternoon, this is the latest AI travel news from gbnews.com, starting with the M4 westbound, where there is ongoing congestion between Junction 19 and Junction 18 near Bury. Drivers face delays of up to 30 minutes due to heavy traffic. On the M4 westbound at Junction 23A in Mega, roadworks have resulted in the closure of the off-slip, with diversions currently in place to manage traffic flow. Keep this in mind if you are planning your journey in this area today. And on the trains, disruptions are affecting services between Carlisle and Glasgow Central or Edinburgh via Avanti West Coast. Additionally, Great Western Railway is experiencing difficulties between Westbury and Weymouth. For more travel news, go to gbnews.com.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 37 minutes past 1. Now, President Macron of France is set to meet Conservative Party leader Kemi Badenoch and her Liberal Democrat counterpart Ed Davey today. But the Reform Party leader, Nigel Farage, are not on the meeting agenda.
Yes, curious. The Deputy Leader, Richard Tice, he said this is an outrageous and deliberate snub, adding if Macron was confident of his handling of the small boats issue, he would happily meet with Nigel.
So, is the French president missing the boat on this one? Well, we're joined by the former leader of UKIP, Henry Bolton. Henry, thanks for joining us today. This is becoming a bit of a diplomatic incident in the lightest possible way. But it is strange, is it not, that Macron's meeting with two opposition leaders, but not the man who leads in the polls?
I actually don't think it is, and I'm not trying to be critical at all of reform or of Nigel. And as far as I know, Nigel's actually not commented on this. He may have done, but I may have missed it. But I think it's mainly Richard Tice who's commented on this. The way I've worked in international diplomacy at head of government level, and the way these things are worked is that the invitation for a state visit is issued by the UK government in this case, and the UK government will then, once it's accepted, then will propose a programme for that visit to the French through diplomatic channels. That will be worked through. There'll be a bit of toing and froing, and they will settle on a programme. So in that sense, it would be highly unusual for the French president to request to meet particular people. What I believe has happened is that the British government has proposed a meeting with the Prime Minister, normal and natural, you'd expect that, the leader of His Majesty's opposition, you'd expect that as well, and Ed Davey is the aberration in this, but Ed Davey does lead a party of 15. And I think the meeting with Ed Davey comes from the fact that fairly recently he's been quite vocal in encouraging the Prime Minister to work closely with France on such things as dealing with Trump's tariffs and the issues in NATO and so on. So he's been sort of trying to encourage the Prime Minister to work closely with France, and so therefore I think the Prime Minister is thinking that Ed Davey, alongside him when meeting Macron, would be a bit of an ally. And
Henry, I would buy your argument in its entirety if it was meeting the Prime Minister and the leader of His Majesty's most loyal opposition. If it was just those two individuals, that would seem proper, constitutional, no questions asked.
I agree.
Ed Davey is the fly in the ointment here, isn't it? I mean, he doesn't hold an official position. He's not the leader of... he's the leader of an opposition party, but not a formal position in the House of Commons.
I agree with you, Tom. And I've just said he's the aberration, and I've explained why I think he's going to be meeting Macron. And I think
because he's on brand, essentially. Because he's on brand. Because he's on brand.
Yeah, exactly. He's on message. Yes, indeed. He's alongside the Prime Minister, and I think the Prime Minister is not confident in his international work. He tries to portray himself as that. He's not. But the other thing to look at is, so I agree with that. But then, if I was Reform, I would actually play a slightly elder statesman approach to this and say, look, Ed Davey is meeting with Macron. Why is there not a meeting involving all of the leaders of all of the parties represented in the House of Commons? That's what should happen. But actually, what I'm uncomfortable with, because and the reason I say that is because I think this country desperately needs grown-up statesman-like politics now, and proper leadership that sort of is about the country, not about the party, not about portraying a party or a politician as being snubbed or a victim. Because, Macron is facing his own constitutional problems, massive crisis actually going on in Paris at the moment, in the French Parliament and so on. He's lost his majority. They've got a left-wing coalition trying to face down the right wing and so on. The last thing that's going to be on his mind is actually wanting to meet a member of Parliament who is leading 4 MPs, when you've got the Greens with 4, you've got DUP with 5, you've got the SNP with 9, you've got the Lib Dems with 15. And I'm sorry, I don't mean to...
The Lib Dems is 72.
Sorry, yes, indeed, sorry. But I don't mean to demean him in the slightest, but my point is that Nigel actually commands less than 1% of the House of Commons at the moment. Now, everybody will say, yes, but he's riding high in the polls, and they've done incredibly well, which they have, all credit to Reform for this, in the local elections. But the reality is that we're talking government to government in these events and in any negotiations and so on. And I've been told by people that, look, Macron is going to have to deal with Farage when Farage is in Downing Street. Well, A, that's 4 years down the road. And B, Macron will not and cannot be president at that time because there are presidential elections in 2027 and Macron cannot stand.
So it would be a bit of a pointless discussion, potentially. Henry Bolton, we'll leave it there. But thank you very much indeed, former UKIP leader Henry Bolton. We've just got a minute just to bring in Sir Michael Ellis here, who's here, former Attorney General. Do you agree with Henry there that it makes sense, really, for Nigel to not have a meeting?
I think, Emily, what you can refer this to is the similar debates have happened in the House of Commons with the procedure there. Nigel only gets a certain amount of time to speak at Prime Minister's questions. He's only called once every so often. The procedures of the House of Commons work on the basis of how many seats you've got.
Yeah.
If it's the similar process here, which I think probably history will tell you it probably is, the Lib Dems at the moment have 72, the Reform have 4 or 5, is it? And so I think having said all that...
It changes quite a bit.
It does, but having said all that, it's quite convenient for the Elysee Palace, I think, because I don't think Macron would be rushing to see Nigel Farage. So, but I suspect this is a question of process, and it's been arranged because of the number of seats.
Just very quickly on the issue of reform, there is some news from the Reform Party. James McMurdoch, MP, now he tweeted a statement saying that he was, well, the whip had let him go, right?
He let removed the whip from himself,
resigned, essentially. Anyway, he now says, I've now had a chance to take specialist legal advice from an expert in the relevant field. In light of that advice, which is privileged, and which I choose to keep private at this time, I have decided to continue my parliamentary career as an independent MP, where I can focus 100% on the interests of my constituents. Now, that follows a Sunday Times investigation into 2 businesses that he set up close to the time of the pandemic, and there were questions raised over the loans that he took out.
Yeah, but I suppose this is a confirmation that he will not be seeking to rejoin Reform anytime soon, that he's removed the whip from himself, he's going to sit as an independent MP.
So that's that.
And that means the Reform Party, in the early hours of the 4th of July last year, when the election came in, they thought they had 4 MPs. James McMurdoch was the result of, I think, 2 or 3 recounts in the afternoon of that day. Then they were up to 5. Then Rupert Lowe left the party. Then they were back down to 4. Then Sarah Pochin was elected. They were back down up to 5. Now James McMurdoch has left and they're back down to 4 again. It is this sort of weird concertina of up and down movement.
So, yes, if you have any thoughts, do let us know. gbnews.com/your say. But in the meantime, we're going to take a little look at some of the holiday travel weather.
Can't wait to get in that sea.
Lovely and warm.
Just like the feeling of having great travel insurance.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News travel destinations forecast.
Things have turned a little cooler across Italy, and a brisk northerly breeze will keep that going in Rome. Some heavy rain recently in Croatia, that's clearing away. Small chance of a shower in Madeira, but the Canaries fine, dry and sunny, as is Portugal and most of southern Spain. So there is the chance of 1 or 2 showers near Barcelona. It's fine and sunny across Greece and Turkey. Plenty of sunshine on offer here. Turning dry now in Croatia, as I said. A chance of 1 or 2 showers later this week, though, in Rome. Goodbye.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News travel destinations forecast.
Well, this is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News, and after the break, astonishing news from the Office for Budget Responsibility. Yes, Rachel Reeves has been hit with a stark warning today. Labour policy shifts and their U-turns leave the UK's finances exposed. National debt under the central projection scenario could soar to 270% of GDP. Are we going bankrupt? That after the break.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Britain's Newsroom, weekday mornings from 9:30.
Well, we have found some peacocks, so we've been speaking to people today, hearing from them how much of a nuisance they say they are. It is a real mix, though, here. Some people saying that actually they're all right, they're part of the furniture of this village now. You can see this peacock here showing all of its feathers. going to be very honest with you, we have just seen it attempt to mate the peahen that you can see behind it there. And this showing of feathers is part of the thing, what they do to try, part of the mating call here as well, to try and show all of the feathers off and everything like that. And there's a thing that they do train rattling as well. I wonder if Mr. Peacock might talk to us. Mr. Peacock, would you?
Come on, Jack. Come on, Jack. We need you to get involved.
Not sure. GB News, Jack
This is your big David Attenborough moment, Jack.
Any questions to say to the nuisance you might be causing people? Any response?
Although this feels a little bit intimate now, if there's a bit of a moment going on. It's all got a bit voyeuristic.
Very happy to talk to us so far this morning, but some residents of Tutbury here have spoken to us this morning. Take a listen to what they've told us about what they think about all these peacocks.
They've been here longer than I have, so I've lived in the house I live in at the top here 47 years. They've been there all that time, because they were from the castle to start with. The people at the castle used to have them, and they're just part of the village.
I hate them. When they do all that damage, it's heartbreaking, you know. Yeah, round them up and take them to a farm or a zoo, where they're supposed to be.
They're like the furniture. They should stay around here. You know, people just need to let them get on with what they are. They're nature's animals, and they deserve to live around here, don't they?
GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
At GB News, we love to hear from you, our loyal community. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/yoursay. There you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/yoursay, because GB News is your channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's almost 10 to 2. Now, is Britain going bankrupt?
Well, Rachel Reeves has received a tough warning, pretty much to that effect.
Yes, it's a report from the OBR that's criticised the government's repeated U-turns, particularly on spending cuts, because if we don't have any, well, the public finances are in dire straits.
Yeah, and national debt projected to rise to 270% of GDP by the early 2070s. Seems a long way off, but it's not actually that far away. Joining us now is Director at the Centre for Policy Studies, Robert Colville. Robert, how worried should we be about these projections?
We should be very worried about them. I mean, this should be the main story on the news every single day, that unless something is done, unless we change path, the country is in an unsustainable position. Essentially, we're going to need either very big tax rises or very big spending cuts.
I mean, this is the most extraordinary thing about it all. I mean, the central projection is that debt is going to go from, well, it's near 100% of GDP now. That's bad enough. To 270% of GDP. But the report says that if productivity continues to grow at the sluggish pace that it's been growing at for the last couple of years, 270 actually would be a massive underestimate. It could rise to 647% of GDP. I mean, is there a single country in the world that has debt at that level? I mean, that is effective bankruptcy.
Yeah, we've been running the public finances essentially since the financial crisis on the basis that something will turn up, that somehow productivity growth will snap back into place, that living standards will rise again, that we'll go back to the world in the 90s and the 2000s and the 80s, and that everything will turn out okay. And we're slowly accepting that it's not going to do that. I mean, the NHS alone over the next 50 years, as the population ages, is set to double as the percentage of the national wealth it takes. As the report today says, the state pension with the triple lock is marching ever upwards. We saw just the other week welfare and incapacity spending meant to go up by 30 billion this Parliament. Labour MPs couldn't even bring themselves to back something which would have taken 5 billion off that 30 billion.
And Robert, how much of this is about the pandemic? Because the report also says that we're in a particularly vulnerable position for any shocks. So if there were, God forbid, something like that to happen again to the global economy, we'd be stuffed.
Yeah, so the pandemic's a huge part of this, but it's accelerated a longer-term story, which is that we haven't been, the way you're meant to do this is you're meant to save during the good years to afford to be able to cope with things like the pandemic or the financial crisis. And what we've been doing is we've been splashing the cash when crises come along, but we haven't then been saving. We haven't then been going back and getting our budget back into surplus. I mean, from memory, I think the national budget has been in surplus 4 or 5 times in the last 50 years. So, and since the pandemic, because of the huge amounts of money we spent, and the economic impacts of that, essentially, we've been running the public finances on a sort of razor edge. The reason that everyone cares about the OBR now and cares about fiscal headroom is that the Chancellor, both Jeremy Hunt and Rachel Reeves and any other Chancellor, has been running the public finances really, really close to the edge. Because they cannot bring themselves.
That is such a good point. I mean, if there was less of a large deficit, we wouldn't care what the OBR said. It wouldn't matter so much. Robert, just really quickly, in the mid-1970s, we had to go crawling to the IMF for a bailout. It was a humiliation for this country, and with it came conditions. I mean, is there any way out of this that doesn't mean that we could head towards the International Monetary Fund for some sort of third world bailout?
I think the real danger is of a bond strike. It's of the gilt market. We are relying on the gilt markets to buy huge amounts of debt from our country every year, and the interest on that debt alone is going to cost us £100 billion every year for the rest of the Parliament. We are already in the top range of the amount we have to pay because the people buying that debt are a bit worried about our trajectory. If they go on strike, if they decide, you know what, we're not going to fund this anymore, we're going to jack up the price this country has to pay, then we will need to have very, very, as I said before, we will need to have very sharp tax rises or very big spending caps.
Let's hope some tough decisions are made by this government and future ones too. Robert Colville there from the Centre for Policy Studies. Lots more coming up. Do stick with us. We'll be back in a tick.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. It's a fine day for most of us with plenty of warm, sunny spells, but cloudier weather will roll into the northwest. Some rain, mostly for Western Scotland and Northern Ireland because of this frontal system toppling in over the top of an area of high pressure which is extending, and that high pressure bringing plenty of fine weather now that low pressure that was responsible for some lively weather through the weekend is moving to the east. Still a brisk breeze running down the North Sea, still the chance of some patchy cloud, perhaps even the odd shower into East Anglia, but mainly early afternoon. Otherwise, all of that weather clears up nicely. Plenty of warm, sunny spells with temperatures into the low to mid-20s. Now for Western Scotland and Northern Ireland, the cloud thickens through the afternoon and we'll see some showers moving through by the evening, perhaps even the odd heavy downpour for the Western Isles at this point. But towards central and eastern and southern Scotland, plenty of warm sunny spells hanging on. Northern Ireland, cloudier skies as well, rain lurking just to the northwest. And for West Wales, parts of Cornwall, some areas of clouds start to move in. But for the rest of England and Wales, plenty of fine weather as we end the day. And we keep clear skies by and large, particularly across central and eastern parts of the UK overnight. Cloudier towards the north and the west. And we've got those outbreaks of rain moving into western and central Scotland. Some patchy rain for Northern Ireland, northwest England as well. Where we've got the cloud, it's going to be a mild night, 14 or 15 Celsius. Perhaps a little cool towards the southeast as we start off Wednesday under those clear skies, but plenty of sunshine, so temperatures rising quickly through the morning. And another fine day is expected across much of England and Wales. I think cloudier conditions for many compared with Tuesday, but even that cloud will disappear into the afternoon. We'll keep some light rain in the far north and northwest, but it is warming up everywhere.
A positive outlook through the night will power through to a bright day ahead. Boxed Home Battery Storage, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Imagine having an extra £1,000 to spend each week for an entire year. £54,321 in tax-free cash could be yours. Cash to spend however you like. £54,321 in cash could be landing in your bank account this year. For another chance to win £54,321 cash, text cash to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus 1 standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB14 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 1st of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Britain's Newsroom with Andrew and Beth.
Hello everyone, Patrick Christie's here.
I'm Michelle Duke, Britain's News Channel.
Access the stories that matter to you. Take the GB News family with you on any device. And as long as you have an internet connection, tune in to GB News anywhere on the planet or beyond. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
At GB News, we love to hear from you, our loyal community. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/yoursay. There you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/yoursay, because GB News is your channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 2 o'clock on Tuesday, the 8th of July. I'm Tom Harwood.
And I'm Emily Carver.
Now an historic visit begins as King Charles welcomes President Macron of France for his 3-day tour of the United Kingdom, a state visit. He warns of complex threats facing both nations.
He also referred to these challenges. No borders, His Majesty is expected to say later on, but royal sources indicate he was not referring to illegal migrant crossings. More detailed shortly.
And yes, Norman Tebbit, one of Margaret Thatcher's most loyal supporters during her years of power, has died at the age of 94.
Elsewhere, is it a make-or-break moment for Sir Keir? The Prime Minister scrambles to salvage a key migrant returns deal with France. With record channel crossings and a sweltering heat wave on the horizon, will a one-out, one-in agreement survive?
And the devastating truth laid bare. The first official report into the Post Office Horizon scandal is out, exposing the personal tragedies and systemic failures behind one of Britain's worst ever miscarriages of justice. So why did it take so long to act?
And the families of 3 young girls murdered in the Southport stabbing attack demand real change as the public inquiry opens today. With harrowing questions over how a teenager came to carry out such horrific violence, could this be a turning point on how we tackle youth extremism?
So the royals and the President of France and his wife are probably wrapping up lunch around now.
I would imagine so, and we're expecting to see them have a bit of a tour of Windsor.
Yes, which will be rather nice for them. But I'm interested in the political agenda, Tom. Not just because I'm a political nerd, although not as much as you, but just because it's very important, isn't it? We rely on the French for quite a bit. We've paid them quite a lot of money over the last however many years, 6 years primarily, since this Channel Crossings scandal really begun.
Yeah.
And we need to get results. Keir Starmer needs to come back from this state visit with some kind of win.
And I think one of the most frustrating things about the Channel Crossing crisis is it's not a crisis of capability. It's a crisis of legalistic red tape. Because these small boats don't physically reach Britain. They haven't for years. What happens is these people are picked up by British vessels that then take them in and process them in the United Kingdom. If it were the case, if it were legally allowed that these vessels could just take them back to France, how many boats would actually try to get across? We're blooming good at picking up people in the middle of the channel, and we just take them to the wrong country.
Well, if you're right, and it's, you know, it's the law that's holding us back, which I believe you are, international laws, agreements, etc., conventions, then we should probably ask for that money back from the French, because it's wasted. 700-odd million pounds that we've sent them. Is it time to just ask for a refund? Do you trust that Keir Starmer will come back with something on this issue, whether it's the one in, one out or anything else?
Well, throughout the show today, of course, we're joined by the former Attorney General, Sir Michael Ellis. And just very briefly, before we get to the headlines, this is an intractable legal issue.
Tom, you're absolutely right. You've hit the nail on the head. The problem, in fact, so many of our country's systemic problems are rooted in legal issues. There is an obstruction that is, frankly, blocking the democratically expressed wishes of the people, because various governments have found themselves blocked from doing what they have been expected to do by the electorate because of legal problems. And that's why we have the debate about the ECHR. That's why we also have a debate about judicial activism, about the power of judges to review executive decisions. The judicial review process, of course, has expanded beyond all recognition in recent decades. Plus the problems of such things like the interpretation of international treaties, the Refugee Convention and the Law of the Sea and so on. So there are many legal obstructions.
Well, we know that our government's Justice Secretary is trying to make some changes to the ECHR, talking to the Council of Europe. We'll see if anything comes of that.
Maybe more banquets are needed, more royal visits for all the members. But all that to come, of course, after your latest news headlines with Katie.
Good afternoon, it's 5 minutes past 2, your latest news headlines from the GB Newsroom. The King has welcomed French President Emmanuel Macron to the UK for his 3-day state visit, starting with a ceremony at Windsor Castle. The Prince and Princess of Wales greeted President Macron and his wife Bridget as their plane landed at RAF Northolt before King Charles and Queen Camilla welcomed them both to Windsor. It's the first UK state visit by a French president since 2008. King Charles says the UK and France both face complex threats, adding that the challenges the two countries face, quote, know no borders. At a summit on Thursday between the two countries, immigration is set to be the centrepiece as Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer aims to get a one-in, one-out migrant returns deal with France over the line. A state banquet at Windsor Castle will take place this evening, where President Macron will also address Parliament. The first volume of the final report into the Post Office Horizon scandal has been published, concluding that at least 13 postmasters may have taken their own lives. More than 900 sub-postmasters were wrongfully prosecuted by the Post Office between 1999 and 2015 in what's been labelled as the worst miscarriage of justice in British legal history. The first part of the report, published today, also found that 59 postmasters considered ending their own lives and that officials knew that the Horizon software could be, quote, illusory. Business and Trade Secretary Jonathan Reynolds said that he welcomed the publication of the report and that he's committed to ensuring wronged sub-postmasters are given full, fair and prompt redress. Chairman of the inquiry, Sir Wyn Williams, summarised his findings.
As I have said once already, but I repeat, the picture which has emerged and which is described in my report is profoundly disturbing. In summary, what does that picture reveal? Many thousands of people have suffered serious financial detriment, and for a sizable proportion, that detriment subsists. Many people have, inevitably, suffered emotional turmoil and significant stress in consequence.
Elsewhere today, junior doctors in England have voted in favour of taking strike action over a pay dispute, as according to the British Medical Association. Resident doctors, otherwise known as junior doctors, are seeking a 29% pay rise. There are fears that the industrial action will now cause prolonged disruption in the NHS, with walkouts potentially lasting until January next year. Number 10 said this lunchtime that resident doctors have had a pay rise of 28.9% over the past 3 years, adding that it was disappointing that they want to strike. The Prime Minister's thoughts are with the family of Lord Tebbit, who is a major figure in British politics and will be missed by many, Downing Street said. Lord Tebbit, former Conservative Party chairman and cabinet minister under Margaret Thatcher, died peacefully yesterday evening. He was first elected as a Conservative MP for Epping in 1970, before entering the House of Lords in 1992. Lord Tebbit and his wife were both nearly killed in the IRA bombing of the Grand Hotel in Brighton in 1984, injuries which left his wife paralysed for the rest of her life. In a statement, Lord Tebbit's son, William, said that the family asked for their privacy to be respected at this time and that a further statement regarding funeral arrangements will be made in due course. Conservative Party leader Kemi Badenoch paid tribute to the late politician.
The Conservative family is mourning Lord Tebbit's loss. He was an icon. We respected him for so many reasons, the battles he fought during the Thatcher government, but probably the most inspiring thing was watching the aftermath of the 1984 Brighton bomb and how he responded to a terrorist attack from the IRA. Just staying stoic, staying brave, showing lots of courage, but most importantly, looking after his wife, who was severely disabled from that terrorist attack. He put family first. He always exemplified personal responsibility. He was the embodiment of what a Conservative should be, and we're going to miss him very much.
And the chairman of Marks & Spencer said that the cyber attack on their company involved sophisticated impersonation, adding that the business is still in rebuild mode. Chairman Archie Norman spoke at the Business and Trade Committee today, although he declined to say whether the company had paid a ransom over the attack. Marks & Spencer's online operation was disrupted for 6 weeks in April and May. Those are your latest GB News headlines. More from me in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
My Claim Group sponsors the GB News Finance Report.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.3577 and €1.1586. The price of gold is £2,449.66 per ounce, and the FTSE 100's at 8,817 points.
My Claim Group sponsors the GB News Finance Report.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 10 minutes past 2. Now the King and Queen have officially welcomed French President Emmanuel Macron and his wife Brigitte to Windsor Castle to start their 3-day state visit to the United Kingdom.
Yes, so the couple were escorted through the town in a ceremonial carriage procession, and upon arrival at the castle they were honoured with a royal salute.
Well, joining us live from Windsor is our royal correspondent Cameron Walker. Cameron, what is going on? What is the very latest in this historic state visit?
Yeah, Tom, well, the red carpet was well and truly rolled out for President Macron of France and the First Lady of France as well. Of course, the day started off at RAF Norfolk, where their plane touched down, and the Prince and Princess of Wales officially greeted the President and his wife before escorting them in here to Windsor, where they met the King and Queen on a specially built dais on Datchet Road, where lots of military processions were taking place. They stood for the French national anthem before being invited to go for a carriage ride through the streets of Windsor Castle. The King, alongside President Macron, in the State Landau carriage, which dates back to 1902. The Prince and Princess of Wales in their own separate carriage alongside a couple of French government ministers, and the Queen and Mrs Macron were also in another carriage as well. The biggest cheer by far was for the Prince and Princess of Wales from the crowds here in Windsor, made up of mostly tourists, I hasten to add. The streets here in Windsor have been decked out in Union flags and French flags as well. The carriage procession then went onto the Long Walk here in Windsor and then through the George IV Archway into the quadrangle of Windsor Castle. That's in the upper ward, the other side of the castle to where I am, for the King to invite President Macron to inspect a guard of honour made up of the Grenadier Guards and the Scots Guards. What happened after that is the royal party and the presidential party went into the castle for a private lunch. Cameras were not allowed inside that private lunch, but in the next few moments we are expecting the King and President Macron and other members of the royal family to have a look at some French items belonging to the royal collection. And I can tell you the most notable item that I could see from the list that I have been given in the last few moments is a gold snuff box that used to belong to Marie Antoinette, the last Queen of France, who of course was guillotined in 1793. So slightly ironic. You're just seeing pictures on your screen now of the French President and King Charles III inspecting that guard of honour. Later on, the President and his wife will be going to London to lay a wreath at the tomb of the unknown soldier in Westminster Abbey. The President also going to be meeting a number of politicians before returning to Windsor for a magnificent state banquet in St George's Hall, a 50-metre table, around 160 guests. In that speech that the King will be delivering, he is expected to stress the vital partnership between the United Kingdom and France, facing a multitude of complex threats. He will also highlight how these challenges know no borders, no fortress can protect us against them this time. Now, royal sources keen to play down the fact that the King could be referring to the Channel migrant crisis. Instead, they are alluding to the fact that the King will be referring to defence, technology ties and climate change.
Interesting stuff. Well, Cameron Walker, thanks indeed for joining us. And of course, we'll be back with you throughout the show as this state visit continues.
Well, in the studio with us is Sir Michael Ellis, who's been with us all afternoon. Thank you very much for your company. It's been splendid to have you on a splendid day for the country.
Absolutely. And the next thing we're going to see, and possibly quite soon now, is the royal party will take President Macron and Mrs Macron into the green drawing room. And this is a room often used for royal events. And they're going to have a collection of items that are connected between the UK and France. And as Cameron alluded to, one of those appears to be, Buckingham Palace has just said, a snuff box from Marie Antoinette. But the room itself is beautifully decorated in green. It looks as though it's been untouched for centuries, but actually it was badly damaged in the fire of 1992, and they did a wonderful job. Some real skilled craftsmanship in restoring that room to pristine condition after that dreadful fire that many will remember from 1992. In that beautiful room is actually some French porcelain, some Sèvres porcelain, which is absolutely priceless. And I'm sure it's not actually part of the sort of specific arrangements made for today, but it's always there. And this is porcelain that is absolutely exquisite, that has been made since about 1740 by the French. And the factory is still in existence. It's actually owned by the French government, I'm told, and it's a sort of badge of French honour. And so I have a feeling they'll notice that porcelain even amongst the royal collection items that will have been dug out for them to see.
It is so funny that they can walk around a castle like Windsor and look back over 1,000 years of history for this country, from when the first structure was put there by William the Conqueror, and trace that incredible history of this country through those 1,000 years and that almost unbroken royal chain. We'll forgive the Commonwealth of England just for a little moment.
Yes.
But of course,
interregnum.
The interregnum.
Oh, we're expecting to hear apparently that the Bayeux Tapestry is going to return to England for the first time in 900 years.
Well, he did mention...
Well, that's very interesting,
I've seen speculation about this.
There was speculation about that years ago.
So is that happening then,
Well,
Sir Michael? Do you know?
Well, I don't know, because I would be careful what I believe, because I'm pretty sure Macron said something in 2018 about that, and it never happened. But maybe he's been reserving
We'd have to exchange for the Sutton Hoo burial ship.
Oh, well... I mean, if it's a temporary exchange, I'm sure we can work something out, unlike the Elgin marbles.
Now, I should say a friend of mine actually visited the Bayeux Tapestry only a few weeks ago. and there was a sign saying that the place was going to undergo some sort of renovation in coming weeks. So that pricked us up to the idea that perhaps it would be moved during that time.
So we'll get that. We won't get a deal on the migrant crisis, but we'll get...
Forget about who's going to get the tapestry. But it is correct to say that it's going to return to Britain, because everyone forgets the Bayeux Tapestry was made in England. That's right. It's not a French thing.
900 years, wow.
Yeah.
OK, well, if that happens, we'll let you know. So, Michael Ellis, for now, thank you very much. We're just going to move on to another important story today. Yes, the first volume of the final report into the Post Office Horizon scandal is set to be published.
Yes, more than 900 sub-postmasters were, of course, wrongly prosecuted by the Post Office between 1999 and 2015 in what's been labelled as the worst miscarriage of justice in British legal history. OK, we're joined by GB News reporter Adam Cherry. Adam, thank you. What do we know?
So this is the first volume, as you said. Sir Wyn Williams, who chaired this report, explaining that today is really about the human element. And the scale of this is really quite shocking. So 13 postmasters, at minimum, we know now to have committed suicide. 59 contemplated it or attempted it. And at least 3,000 claims still open. And really, the point of today is part two will be more about who's responsible, pointing fingers and so on, going into that aspect of the scandal. Today, the human element. And as I say, it's all about, the time it's taken, even yet some are still unsatisfied, for claims to be repaid, even though billions have been pledged by the government. We've had a statement from the Business Secretary, Jonathan Reynolds, in the last couple of hours, and he said today was an important milestone for sub-postmasters and their families. He said, "I welcome the publication today and am committed to ensuring wronged sub-postmasters are given full, fair and prompt redress." And the government will respond to those recommendations in full in Parliament. There are 19 recommendations in today's report, mainly focusing again on that compensation, speeding it up, and the government has to respond by October. Now, there's a whole question of what does that actually mean in terms of a full, fair redress for this, and also, why did it take so long? Why are there still so many claims that are still open? Part of the problem is there are several claims bodies. It's all convoluted. It's very difficult for the sub-postmasters to make their claim in the first place, to get heard. That's why it's taken so long. But interestingly, Sir Wyn Williams says, even though these are unsatisfactory, that they haven't provided the results that the public would expect, he's not actually saying we should set up a new body and start again, because that would take even longer. So that's a frustration for those affected by this hearing the report today, or reading the report rather. But nonetheless, it is an open question how this will be resolved, when we can expect full justice. But certainly those sitting there in the audience today listening to Sir Wyn Williams were at least satisfied that they're being taken seriously, and that the government is promising, alongside the Post Office and Fujitsu, to respond to this fully in time.
Thank you, Adam. Thank you very much indeed for that update. Pretty shocking what some of the inquiry says about people, taking their own lives.
Yeah.
13 people taking their own lives, further 59 contemplated suicide, 10 had attempted it. I mean, the trauma of this incident, really, being wrongly accused.
Yeah, just shocking, absolutely shocking. But there is so much more to come on Good Afternoon Britain this afternoon. And in the meantime, plenty of time still to grab your chance to win a big, big cash prize. Yes, £54,321 in tax-free cash is up for grabs. Here are the details.
You have the chance to win our biggest cash prize to date in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. As there's an incredible £54,321 in tax-free cash to be won. What would you spend it on? A brand new car, the holiday of a lifetime, or just the chance to sit back, relax and remove some of those day-to-day financial stresses? £54,321 in tax-free cash has to be won. For another chance to win £54,321 cash, text cash to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB14 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 1st of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Well, this is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. Lots more to come. Indeed, we'll have more details from the historic French state visit. Fresh pictures of the King and the President.
This is our country, and we think it's amazing. From high tea to the high street, we love it all. Even the rain, we like that too. There's nowhere else we'd rather be. That's why we're here to be the fearless champion of Britain, its voices and its values. Because we are GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
5 hosts, 5 opinions, 5 fearless debates, 5 unfiltered takes on the day's news.
5 reasons not to be anywhere else on Saturday night.
This is the Saturday 5. You got me. You got me good there. Britain's biggest Saturday night TV show. It's not a bad brand. Yeah. Uncensored.
Very, very easy tonight.
On the unpredictable.
What did she say? Can you translate it for us?
And always entertaining.
And how can a country go from being led by William Wallace Saturday nights from 6 p.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
You're going to want to stay tuned, trust me.
Who is he? What's he doing there?
They already know who you are, Megan.
Don't miss this special reunion. Eamon and Anne together again only on GB News Breakfast this weekend from 6 a.m.
And is that a gardening tan?
No, it's a cypress tan.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 25 minutes past 2 and we're going to cross straight back to Windsor as the President of France and Mrs Macron are viewing a special exhibition of items relating to France from the Royal Collection. This is all part of their state visit to the UK, of course.
OK, Cameron, tell us, what's the latest?
Yeah, as we speak, Tom, they are viewing items from the Royal Collection in the Green Drawing Room, one of the staterooms inside Windsor Castle. Most noticeable from what I could see on the list of items is a golden snuff box, once belonging to the final Queen of France, Marie Antoinette, who was guillotined in 1793 in Paris. But I must just show you this a quite funny video that has emerged of just before the carriage procession entered the upper wards of Windsor Castle. What happened was the French delegation were trying to get ahead of the carriage procession, and they got ahead and they were trying to unload all the luggage before the carriages arrived, and they realised they'd run out of time, and they had to drive off very quickly, and all the luggage fell out of the cars. So this is all the French luggage being spilled out on the floor just outside Windsor Castle, and you see all the French officials desperately trying to pick up the luggage before the carriages runs it all over. So, yeah, a little bit of a blunder from the French officials there. Perhaps the timing was not quite right. But nonetheless, a very funny video just before the King and President Macron arrived in the carriage. I mean, you can see literally, you know, there would have been an extra minute and those luggage, that luggage would have been run over by a lot of horses and soldiers. And those cars most definitely would have been in the way.
So whose bags are those then,
so that's
Cameron?
what happened.
Cameron, whose bags are those?
They're French bags. We don't. So Emily, they're French bags. We don't know who the bags belong to. It can either be the French staff or you know, it could, I suppose, possibly be the French presidents. I doubt it, though. I think it's probably more likely their staff. But nonetheless, a very awkward faux pas, perhaps, from the French delegation ahead of the carriage procession.
French
Elsewhere, of
logistics
course,
has never
inside the
recovered
palace, it's
since,
a bit more calm and a bit more coordinated. Inside the castle. Sorry, Tom?
Sorry, I know there's a delay on the line. I was just going to make a trite comment that French logistics has never recovered since the invasion of Russia by Napoleon. But but Cameron, do carry on. What else is there?
That singer.
Yes, well, everything else, according to the French president's schedule, is a little bit more choreographed. So they've had lunch in the stateroom. They're then viewing the royal collection of items to do with France, as I was saying. Then the French president and his wife will travel to London, where they will lay a wreath at the tomb of the unknown soldier. The president will then visit the Palace of Westminster and will address parliamentarians and will also meet members of Parliament and members of the House of Lords as well. The President is then travelling to Lancaster House, which is just a stone's throw from Buckingham Palace. It's practically next door to the palace, actually, where he's going to be meeting opposition leaders, including Kemi Badenoch of the Conservatives and Sir Ed Davey of the Liberal Democrats. He's not expected to meet Nigel Farage of the Reform UK, but he is definitely going to be meeting Kemi Badenoch and Sir Ed Davey. Following those political meetings, he will be returning here alongside his wife to Windsor Castle ahead of the state banquet this evening. Now, it's a 50-metre long table that's been laid out in St George's Hall, one of the staterooms inside Windsor Castle. We're expecting around 160 guests, a mixture of French and British diplomats, members of the royal family, as perhaps maybe a smattering of celebrities and well-known figures associated with both Britain and France as well. They don't confirm the guest list until very much closer to the time. We will bring that to you. But what we do know, of course, is some of the details of what King Charles will be saying in his speech. And he is expected to talk about, as you would expect, the close ties between Britain and France, but also highlight the challenges and saying that these challenges know no borders, no fortress can protect us against them this time. Now, is this a subtle hint or a subtle suggestion that the King might be talking about illegal migration? Now, royal sources are very keen to stress or play down that point, I should add, instead suggesting that the King will be talking about strong technological ties, defence ties, and of course King Charles's favourite, climate change as well. So all eyes are going to be on that speech later on tonight.
They will indeed. Cameron Walker, thank you very much indeed. You're in Windsor for us, and thank you for bringing us that amusing clip. Some light and shade, as always.
Absolutely. It's almost gone off without a hitch. So Michael Ellis, the former Attorney General, joins us in the studio. You've been with us all show, and I thank you for that. This banquet this evening, always a grand state affair. What can we expect?
Well, first of all, they better hope it's not Mrs Macron's luggage that was falling out of that vehicle.
No.
Cameron got those good pictures, because they'll all be dressed to the nines this evening in white tie and tails, and the ladies in tiaras and full-length gowns. It's a wonderful occasion. St George's Hall at Windsor is a really extraordinary feature of the castle. It is ancient in one sense, but it also was very badly damaged in the 1992 fire. But one of the things that it would be very nice to notice in that hall is actually the ceiling, because the ceiling has the Garter badges of all of the Garter knights since the year 1348. And some of those Garter badges, and there's over 1,000 now Garter knights, Prince William actually was the 1,000th a few years ago, some of them have been blanked out. And you look up and you see all these colourful garter badges and some white ones where they've just literally been whitewashed out. And they were the ones who were unfortunate enough to get their heads chopped off at various points in history. And they just were left blank.
It's just a bit of a Stalinist purging of history.
Exactly. And you can look up and you see these white ones, and the first thing you notice is the fact that these are not coloured in, and why is that the case? One of them is Oliver Cromwell's. He was the 300th garter, and they just... When they chopped his head off, of course, he'd already died of natural causes. They just whited out his... but I have to say something else about this banquet tonight. Quite an extraordinary event. Did you know there are 8 people who will take 3 weeks to do the washing up afterwards?
No.
Wow.
That is what the royal authorities say. It takes that long because it's not...
That can't be true.
Well,
surely they could just hire some more people. The king and queen.
Will help.
It's because it's so precious. Some of these... The gilt dinner service is George IV. There are... each table place has 6 glasses.
Gosh, imagine if you broke something.
Probably a dozen pieces of cutlery for each
This is why under etiquette rules, royal etiquette is never clink glasses. Because they're also I suppose it's also the proper etiquette of just anyone. You shouldn't clink glasses. It's not the correct thing to do.
I like to clink my glass.
It's just priceless. Some of this stuff is 2 centuries old and absolutely priceless. And the king will be, I think, right now or very soon, will be showing President Macron some of the Windsor Great Park. There's 2,000 acres of land. Of course, way back, in the 1200s, this land was even larger for royal deer hunting. But there's still 2,000 acres. And there are some trees. You were talking about the history, Tom. There are some trees in that park which are over 1,000 years old. So there's one tree, King Offa's oak, which is 1,300 to 1,500 years old. Wow. So imagine, even when William the Conqueror turned up, it was already a mature tree, a 300 years old tree.
That's older than England as a unified entity.
Totally.
There's something very emotional about a tree being that old.
Yeah. Extraordinary stuff.
1,500 years old, well.
It's such a beautiful park that they've filmed Harry Potter there, and some scenes of Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince were filmed there, and a lot of movies get filmed there.
Well, Sir Michael Ellis, we're going to have to wrap it up for now, but we'll be back to you very shortly. I'm worried about the King Charles's speech, though. Bit worried about what he's saying in between the lines.
Well, given what they've been briefing Cameron Walker, maybe they're hurriedly rewriting some sections of it ahead of its delivery later on. But this is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. Plenty more to come.
Yes, now the families of 3 young girls murdered in the Southport stabbing attack demand real change as a public inquiry opens today. We're going to have the details. Will they find the answers to the right questions? But first, the news with Katie.
Good afternoon. The headlines at 2:34. French President Emmanuel Macron and his wife Brigitte have arrived in the UK for their 3-day state visit. The King and Queen welcomed them to Windsor. The first volume of the final report into the Post Office Horizon scandal has been published, concluding that at least 13 postmasters may have taken their own lives. Junior doctors in England have voted in favour of taking strike action over a pay dispute, the British Medical Association said today. Former Conservative Party chairman and cabinet minister under Margaret Thatcher, Norbert Tebbit, has died at the age of 94. Tory party leader Kemi Badenoch paid tribute.
He was the embodiment of what a Conservative should be, and we're going to miss him very much.
And the public inquiry into the murders of 3 young girls in Southport last July has begun today, with Chairman Sir Adrian Fulford making an opening statement in Liverpool Town Hall. Those are the latest headlines for now. More news at the top of the hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hi there and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. It's a fine day for most of us with plenty of warm, sunny spells, but cloudier weather will roll into the northwest. Some rain, mostly for Western Scotland and Northern Ireland because of this frontal system toppling in over the top of an area of high pressure which is extending, and that high pressure bringing plenty of fine weather now that low pressure that was responsible for some lively weather through the weekend is moving to the east. Still a brisk breeze running down the North Sea, still the chance of some patchy cloud, perhaps even the odd shower into East Anglia, but mainly early afternoon. Otherwise, all of that weather clears up nicely. Plenty of warm, sunny spells with temperatures into the low to mid-20s. Now, for Western Scotland and Northern Ireland, the cloud thickens through the afternoon and we'll see some showers moving through by the evening, perhaps even the odd heavy downpour for the Western Isles at this point. But towards central and eastern and southern Scotland, plenty of warm, sunny spells hanging on. Northern Ireland, cloudier skies as well, rain lurking just to the northwest. And for West Wales, parts of Cornwall, some areas of clouds start to move in. But for the rest of England and Wales, plenty of fine weather as we end the day. And we keep clear skies by and large, particularly across central and eastern parts of the UK overnight. Cloudier towards the north and the west. And we've got those outbreaks of rain moving into western and central Scotland. Some patchy rain for Northern Ireland, northwest England as well. Where we've got the cloud, it's going to be a mild night, 14 or 15 Celsius. Perhaps a little cool towards the southeast as we start off Wednesday under those clear skies, but plenty of sunshine, so temperatures rising quickly through the morning. And another fine day is expected across much of England and Wales. I think cloudier conditions for many compared with Tuesday, but even that cloud will disappear into the afternoon. We'll keep some light rain in the far north and northwest, but it is warming up everywhere.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
Good afternoon. This is the latest AI travel news from GBNews.com. Bedfordshire faces significant delays on the M1 northbound between junctions 12 and 13 due to a multi-vehicle incident. 2 lanes are closed with delays up to 1 hour. Westbound travellers on the M4J23A off-slip at Mega face diversions due to maintenance. In West Sussex, a collision on the M23 southbound exit slip at junction 9 causes lane closures and delays. Traffic should return to normal by 3 o'clock this afternoon. And on the trains, Avanti West Coast services face disruptions between Carlisle and Glasgow Central, with Hull trains operating a reduced service today. For more travel news, go to gbnews.com.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 38 minutes past 2. Now a public inquiry into one of the most horrific crimes in the country's history, which of course saw 3 young girls stabbed to death during a dance class in Southport. Well, that inquiry has begun today.
Yes, and it's going to look at whether the attack could or should have been prevented, considering what was known about the killer.
Well, joining us in our studio is our Home and Security editor, Mark White. Mark, it does seem very often with these cases that a lot was known about the individual, that they were known to police. But in this case, with this killer, so much was known.
Yes, by all of the authorities, not just the police, the court system, healthcare, social services, all had dealings with Axel Rudikabana for a number of years. Since the age of 13, actually, he was referred to the Prevent Counter-Extremism programme on 3 separate occasions. He'd been stopped at times with a knife. He'd gone into school and assaulted a fellow pupil with a hockey stick. Also then, when searched, was seen to have had a knife in his bag as well. He's someone that had professed quite regularly his desire to commit very significant violence on a scale equivalent to the kind of atrocities you see in schools in the US. So everyone, it seems, of all these agencies were aware at some point of just what a violent and troubled young man this was. But it seems every agency involved felt it wasn't really necessarily something that they should be dealing with, but the other agency was better placed to deal with him. So that's what Sir Adrian Fulford, the chair of the Southport inquiry, will be trying to get to the bottom of exactly why opportunities were missed, what more can be done to ensure that if, God forbid, and sadly, as we know, there will be other horrific crimes in the future, that agencies work better. But of course, time and time again, we've seen inquiries where lessons are supposed to have been learned and very rarely are.
And we know there's also going to be an inquiry, isn't there, into the horrific stabbings in Nottingham too. Is it common practice to have, after a horrific crime of this scale, for there to be a public inquiry, or is this a relatively new development in our country?
Well, it depends how big the event is. Usually there will be either some souped-up inquest type public inquiry, as we saw with 7/7 after those attacks, or there will be a public inquiry. This was, of course, announced by Home Secretary Yvette Cooper in January. She also gave into pressure with regard to the Nottingham killings, the Prime Minister announcing, of course, that there would be an inquiry, a public inquiry into that as well. So it depends, you know, how much pressure there is, how much public appetite there is for a full-blown inquiry. And if there are clearly very significant and serious questions to answer, Nottingham, just like this Southport attack, also raised very troubling questions about the history of the Nottingham killer, the mental health episodes that he'd suffered, the constant refusal, actually, to take part in treatment programmes that those within mental health and other agencies just sort of stepped back from and allowed him to be non-compliant like that. So they're both cases that raise very troubling questions.
There are parallels in a way, yeah.
Axel Riddichbana, Valdo Kalloke, names that I think we all wish we simply didn't know. But, I mean, for years with Axel Riddichbana, there were, as you say, authorities stepping in, from in and out of the Prevent programme, people sort of aware of his violent tendencies at school. At one point, I think he was dressed up as Doctor Who in a sort of BBC outreach effort in order to... I mean, they threw everything that they had at him in terms of the softly approach. And I wonder if perhaps one of these elements will be... Was there too much softly? Oh, just give him a chance. I'm sure he'll turn out to be a lovely young man in the end, despite his obsession with murder. I mean, perhaps we weren't hard enough on this particular individual.
Yeah, I mean, he was referred to. This is the thing, though. He was... Yeah. When he was violent... when he attacked fellow pupils, when he expressed a desire to carry out mass stabbings or shootings like the US, he was then referred to agencies. But it was this just sort of passing of the buck and a feeling that they couldn't actually deal with him themselves.
Is this not also a problem with the Prevent programme, whose head has now
yeah, but remember,
on?
It's not just the Prevent programme. They all did the same. You know, from the police to the courts to the social services, they all passed the buck and felt they couldn't deal with him.
Very often when we talk about an act of terror, although this wasn't necessarily considered to be terrorism in and of itself, but that's a debate to be had about definitions. Very often you will hear they were referred to Prevent, but the way that I understand the Prevent programme works is someone is referred to it, they go on a course, and then it's almost like they're let go. They don't tend to keep that many tabs on that many people who have been through the Prevent programme. It's sort of you're in, you're out, you're off. I mean, surely that's something that should be looked at. Yeah, well, Prevent is part of the referral mechanism anyway, and clearly, if someone is seen to be on a sort of a trajectory that is heading towards violent extremism, then they go further up the ladder to the contest strategy from Prevent. So, yes, it's meant to give this sort of required intervention at that point. But of course, as I say, if kind of extremist behaviour intensifies, there's supposed to be other mechanisms that spring into place. But even Prevent just didn't feel at that basic level of intervening and de-radicalising an individual,
worrying, isn't it?
That it wasn't really something that they should be involved in, because they couldn't find an ideology. You know, mixed ideology. He was looking at all kinds of, you know, extremist, Islamist, far right, all of the above, looking at just, he was fascinated by death and misery and murder. and, of course, enacted that in such a terrible way in Southport. I should say, with regard to his name, which we've mentioned once here in this broadcast, the chair, Sir Adrian Fulford, has mentioned his name once at the opening. He said, I will not mention it again. He will be referred to as the perpetrator or AR, after his initials. But that's it, because he says, and quite rightly, it's disturbing for the families to constantly hear this name. And also he's asked the media, and I'm sure that we will be compliant on this channel, not to keep showing that image, that mugshot image of the wild hair.
Terrifying.
And, it is. If you imagine that you're a young girl or a family caught up in that, to see that man's face like that, it must be terrifying. So, again, that's a message that's coming out, and it doesn't seem like an unreasonable request either from the chair.
I'm just wondering just how many young people are out there who are exhibiting all of these warning signs, who are going through the system and, they can't keep tabs on them.
Way too many.
No solution for them. Yeah. If it's not prison, where is it? Mark White, thank you very much indeed, GB News Home and Security Editor.
Now, if you're in search of getting away from some of this doom and gloom, maybe you're on a holiday. Here's the travel weather.
Can't wait to get in that sea.
Lovely and warm.
Just like the feeling of having great travel insurance.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Things have turned a little cooler across Italy, and a brisk northerly breeze will keep that going in Rome. Some heavy rain recently in Croatia, that's clearing away. Small chance of a shower in Madeira, but the Canaries fine, dry and sunny, as is Portugal and most of southern Spain. So there is the chance of 1 or 2 showers near Barcelona. It's fine and sunny across Greece and Turkey. Plenty of sunshine on offer here, turning dry now in Croatia, as I said. A chance of 1 or 2 showers later this week, though, in Rome. Goodbye.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
You want to know what's really going on in the corridors of power? Labour don't know what to do with you half the time, and that makes you quite lethal in the chamber. Get behind the headlines with Chopper's Political Podcast. Join me, Christopher Hope, as I sit down with the great and the good of British politics. We'll see where this ruling takes us. These are the stories shaping our nation. Chopper's Political Podcast, available now on all platforms. Listen in and stay ahead.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's at the Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't
No,
because the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back,
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
and we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Dubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, It Happens Here.
On Britain's newsroom, weekdays from 9:30am.
Only on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, though.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's just gone 10 to 3. Now let's return to that news from earlier today that sadly the Conservative Party grandee, the big beast, Lord Tebbit, Norman Tebbit, has died at the age of 94.
OK, well, joining us now is a former aide to Margaret Thatcher, Niall Gardner. Niall, give us an insight into Lord Tebbit. What was he like?
Well, thank you for having me on the show today. And I had the opportunity to meet with Lord Tebbit on numerous occasions, actually, when I worked for Lady Thatcher in a private office between 2000 and 2002. And I have to say that Lord Tebbit was a truly unique political figure. He was a man of great principle, really, a true patriot. He lived, I think, every moment of his life on behalf of the British people. He was at Margaret Thatcher's side, of course, for many decades. And he was the kind of, I think, truly courageous, principled conservative that is what we need to see today, actually, that kind of real leadership. He was uncompromising. He fought the socialists tooth and nail and won overwhelmingly in the many battles he fought alongside Margaret Thatcher. And he was a man of tremendous loyalty who Lady Thatcher could always rely upon for advice, for support, and somebody who was at her side for much of her political career, especially as Prime Minister. And he will be greatly missed. I think Norman Tebbit was a real legend, actually. And I think that we may never see the likes of Lord Tebbit again, frankly. I mean, he was a truly unique figure.
Yeah, Margaret Thatcher brought such a revolution to this country, and in many ways Lord Tebbit exemplified, personified that story of, coming from humble origins, making a success of yourself, famously telling people, you can always find some work. Well, Niall Gardner, thanks indeed for joining us and talking through your memories, a loss to the nation.
Yeah, sadly, we've come to the end of our show. Thank you for watching Good Afternoon Britain. Do not go anywhere, because, of course, it is Martin Daubney up next, and he's got a big show for you. Martin, what's up?
Hi guys, the Entente Cordiale on full display today, the first royal visit for Emmanuel Macron. But already it's kicked off. The King has waded in and made this political, saying there are no borders on the precise day Sir Keir Starmer wants a border deal. We'll be live in Parliament at 4 p.m. as Macron addresses the nation, and at 4:50 p.m. as he lays a wreath at the feet of Winston Churchill. Have the French ever shown true gratitude for being liberated from the Nazis? Loads of talking points, loads of fun, 3 till 6, but first, here's your weather.
Even though we'll see a cloudy start, it'll be a bright outlook for the rest of the day. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. Sunny and warm out there for many of us today, but it is turning cloudier from the northwest, leading to some damp weather for Western Scotland and Northern Ireland later. That's because of these weak weather fronts that are pushing in over the top of an area of high pressure, and it's that high pressure that is going to increasingly dominate the weather across the UK during the rest of the week. That's led to plenty of clear skies through the day, and we keep those clear skies through the Midlands, eastern and southern England, as well as East Wales overnight. But elsewhere, thicker cloud rolls in, and that cloud producing some spots of rain for the north and west of Scotland, Northern Ireland, north west England. Keeping the temperatures mild, 14 or 15 Celsius under the cloud, cooler towards the southeast, but that's where we'll see the best of the sunshine first thing Wednesday. Meanwhile, it's a gloomy start to the day for the north and west of Scotland. Light rain and drizzle here, especially for western coasts and hills. Northern Ireland, likewise, the north seeing spells of rain and drizzle first thing. Nothing particularly heavy, but it's going to be a damp, gloomy start. North Wales, similar, but the cloud more patchy across the north and west of England. And for the southeast, it's sunny skies. That will help the temperatures rise through the morning. It's going to be a warm day. But for much of England and Wales, as well as eastern Scotland, it does turn brighter. The cloud thins and breaks into the afternoon. I think we'll keep the thick, low cloud for the north and west of Scotland, some drizzle remaining into the afternoon here, keeping temperatures at 17 or 18 Celsius. But under the sunshine elsewhere, mid to even the high 20s are possible. So a very warm day to come for many, and it's going to turn even warmer during the next few days, with high pressure building widely, pushing weather fronts well to the north, widespread sunny skies developing by the start of the weekend. And watch how those temperatures rise. It's not just the south, but further north as well.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
We're kick-starting summer with your chance to win our biggest cash prize to date, as there's an incredible £54,321 in tax-free cash to be won. What would you spend it on? A brand new car, the holiday of a lifetime, or just sit back, relax and remove some of those day-to-day financial stresses? For another chance to win, text cash to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB14 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 1st of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Welcome back to Breakfast. Now, experts are warning that lithium suppliers will not keep up with the demand for electric cars.
Yeah, researchers say domestic lithium production could grow as much by about 10 times what it currently is by 2030, but will still fall short of demand.
So this morning we're asking whether Labour's green car policy is unachievable.
This policy tells you everything you need to know about net zero. This isn't about giving people free choices about the technologies they want to use. This is about saying we're going to have mandatory targets. It's a sad indictment on our country if we've just normalised the government making these fundamental decisions for people's lives. The CEBR has warned that this policy might cost the country. That's rigid targets for battery electric vehicles, known as the ZEV mandate. 80% of all vehicles will have to be electric vehicles by 2030, rising to 100% by 2035. And that policy is expected to cost £400 billion to the UK economy. And of course, car makers as well have warned that this policy is not achievable.
The latest stats say 47% of vehicles sold in Britain are now EVs. We're halfway there after just 2 years of the electric mandate. We've another 5 years to go. It's speeding up. And this charge that lithium, we're going to have a shortage of lithium, is nonsense. What it says is that there may be the consumption of lithium is increasing, so the domestic production will not be sufficient, but there's plenty in the world.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Hey, bonjour, mon ami. It's 3 p.m. Welcome to the Martin Daubney Show here on GB News. We're broadcasting for you live from the heart of Westminster and all across the UK. On today's historic show, Britain is rolling out the royal red carpet for the French President Emmanuel Macron today as he enjoys a full state visit. Macron will be the first European leader to get the full treatment since Brexit. Will the Entente Cordiale be strengthened? Or will it be weakened? We'll be live as Macron addresses Parliament and then live as he lays a wreath at the Churchill statue, lest we forget the Prime Minister who saved France from the Nazis. And top of Sir Keir Starmer's state visit wish list is to cement his so-called one-in, one-out deal with France to help curb spiralling illegal immigration. But with 6 other European Union member states already crying no, is the deal watertight? And the king has created a right royal political storm once again, as he is set to tell Emmanuel Macron that there are no borders between Britain and France. Now that might please the Welkerati, and it might even please the people smugglers. But does it show that the king is completely out of touch with the British public? That's all coming up in your next hour. Welcome to the show, live from the heart of Westminster. And in a short while time, right outside the studio in the streets of Westminster, Emmanuel Macron will roll into London to get the full royal red carpet treatment. He'll speak in Parliament at 4 p.m. We'll be live for you for that. Before that, he'll visit Westminster Abbey, just across the street from us here, to lay a wreath at the tomb of the forgotten soldier. We'll talk about France's legacy, our bond together, the Entente Cordiale. Are we still allies, or have we become foes? Of Macron suffering from record low popularity at home, visiting Britain with the Prime Minister suffering his own popularity deficit, and a king wading in